Hello everyone. Welcome to Black Fog, your guide for drifting off. I know you listen to help you fall asleep. So like and subscribe to Black Fog before we start. Where are you from and what's your time? Now get comfortable and relax. I'm a 911 operator. I work the graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You hear a lot of things in this job. A lot of pain, a lot of fear, a lot of just weirdness. But usually there's an explanation. Usually it fits into a box, however grim that box might be. This one doesn't fit in any box I know. And it's been eating at me for weeks. I need to get it out. I've changed some minor details to protect privacy. But the core of it, the part that keeps me up when I finally get home, that's all here. It was a Tuesday, or technically Wednesday morning, around 2:30 a.m., the witching hour, some call it. For us, it's usually just the quiet before the post-bar closing storm, or the time when the truly desperate calls come in. The air in the dispatch center was stale, smelling faintly of lukewarm coffee and the ozone hum of too many electronics. My screen glowed with the CAD, computer-aided dispatch system, mostly green, all quiet. I was idly tracing the condensation ring my water bottle left on the desk, trying to stay alert. Then a call dropped into my queue. Standard ring. I clicked to answer. 911. What is the address of your emergency? Standard opening. My voice was calm, practiced. The other end was quiet for a beat, just a ragged, shallow breath. Then, a woman's voice, tight and trembling. I don't know if this is an emergency. I think I'm going crazy. Not an uncommon start, especially at this hour. Loneliness, paranoia, sometimes undiagnosed mental health issues. Okay, ma'am, can you tell me what's happening? And I still need your address so I know where you are. Yes, of course. 1427 Hawthorne Lane. Her voice was thin. My name is... Well, that doesn't matter right now, does it? I typed the address into the system. Popped up clean. Residential. Okay. 1427 Hawthorne Lane. Got it. Tell me what's going on, ma'am. There's someone in my wardrobe. My internal check-a-box system clicked. Possible home invasion. Or, again, paranoia. Someone in your wardrobe? Are you sure? Have you seen them? No, not seen. Heard. She took a shaky breath. It started about an hour ago. A knocking sound. From inside my bedroom wardrobe. A knocking sound? I prompted, keeping my tone even. Could it be pipes? An animal in the walls? The usual rationalizations. No, it's not like that. It's deliberate. Like someone tapping to get out. I thought I was dreaming. Or just hearing things, old house sounds, but it kept happening. Tap, 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 tap. She mimicked it, and even through the phone line, the distinct rhythm was unsettling. Are you alone in the house, ma'am? Yes, completely alone. My husband, he passed away last year. Her voice hitched a little on that. I made a mental note. Grief can do strange things to the mind. I'm very sorry for your loss, ma'am. I said genuinely. This knocking, did you try to investigate it? I was too scared at first. I just lay in bed, pulling the covers up. But it wouldn't stop. It just kept going. So eventually I got up. I turned on the light. I went to the wardrobe. Her breathing was getting faster. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric, like she was wringing her hands or clutching her clothes. And what happened when you got to the wardrobe, ma'am? The knocking stopped when I got close. And then I heard a voice. Her voice dropped to a whisper. A little boy's voice said, "Help me. Please help me. I'm trapped." A chill, faint but definite, traced its way down my spine. This was different. A boy's voice? From inside the wardrobe. Yes, he sounded so scared. He said his daddy put him in there and he can't get out. Okay, This was escalating. A child's voice claiming to be trapped by his father. This had moved past old house sounds, but still the details were odd. A child just appearing in a wardrobe? Ma'am, did you open the wardrobe door? Yes. As soon as he said that, I threw it open. I don't know what I was expecting, but there was nothing there. Her voice cracked with a mixture of fear and confusion. Just my clothes, shoes on the floor, nothing, and the voice. It was gone. Silence. Nothing at all? I clarified. No sign of anyone. No way a child could be hiding? No, it's not a deep wardrobe. You'd see. I even pushed clothes aside. It was empty. I thought I must have imagined it. The stress, being alone. And what happened then? I asked, leaning forward slightly. My other hand was hovering over the dispatch button, but I needed more. This felt off, not like a prank. Prank callers usually have a different energy, a smugness or a forced panic. This woman sounded genuinely terrified and bewildered. I was so relieved, but also so confused. I stood there for a minute, trying to catch my breath. Then I closed the wardrobe door. She paused, and I could hear a sharp intake of air. And the second it latched, the knocking started again, louder this time, and the little boy's voice. Please, don't leave me in here. He'll be angry if he finds out I was talking. Her voice broke into a sob. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Is it a ghost? Am I losing my mind? But it sounds so real. I took a slow breath myself. My skepticism was warring with a growing sense of unease. The sequence of events was bizarre, but her terror felt authentic. Okay, ma'am, stay on the line with me. You're in your bedroom now. No, I ran out. I'm in the living room. I locked the bedroom door, but I can still faintly hear it. The knocking. Is the wardrobe in your master bedroom? Yes, the big one. Oh God, he's talking again. Her voice was hushed, urgent. He's saying his dad locked him in because he was a bad boy. He said his dad gets really mad and hurts him sometimes. That was it. That specific detail, the abuse allegation. Whether this was a delusion, a ghost, or something else entirely, if there was even a fraction of a chance a child was in danger, we had to act. My fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating a dispatch for a welfare check, possibly a child endangerment situation. I coded it high priority. Ma'am, I'm sending officers to your location right now. Okay? They're gonna check this out. I need you to stay on the phone with me. They're coming? Oh, thank God. Thank you. Relief flooded her voice, but the undercurrent of terror remained. He's crying now. The little boy. He's saying his dad told him if he made any noise, he'd be in for it. He says he's scared of the dark. I relayed the additional information to the responding units. Caller states she can hear a child's voice from a wardrobe, claiming his father locked him in and abuses him. Child is reportedly scared and crying. The dispatcher on the radio acknowledged. Units en route. ETA 6 minutes. 6 minutes can feel like an eternity on a call like this. I tried to keep her talking, to keep her grounded. Ma'am, what's your name? It's Eleanor. Eleanor Vance. Okay, Eleanor. The officers are on their way. Are you somewhere you feel safe right now? I'm in the living room, like I said. I have the door locked, but the sound, it's like it's getting clearer even from here. Or maybe I'm just listening harder. She paused. He's saying, Daddy says I shouldn't talk to strangers. But you're not a stranger if you're helping, are you? My blood ran cold. The innocence of that, juxtaposed with the implied threat. It was deeply disturbing. Are you talking to him? I asked her. No, it's just I can hear him so clearly. I don't know how he is talking to me from upstairs. It's just like he can hear me talking to you. Maybe I shouldn't have came down. Maybe I should go back to the room. No, Eleanor, stay where you are. You're helping, and we're helping too. Wait for the dispatch, please. I could hear her quiet, fearful breathing. I focused on the CAD screen, watching the little car icons representing the patrol units crawl across the map towards Hawthorne Lane. Each tick of the clock in the dispatch center sounded unnaturally loud. "Eleanor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "When the officers arrive, they'll knock. Let them know it's you. Okay?" "Yes, yes, I will." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's saying thank you. The little boy. He says he hopes they come soon because it's hard to breathe in here." Hard to breathe. My stomach clenched. That detail was chillingly specific. Ventilation in a closed wardrobe wouldn't be great. "They're almost there, Eleanor. Just a couple more minutes. Unit 214. Show us on scene at 1427 Hawthorne." The voice of Officer Miller crackled through my headset. "Copy that. 214. Caller is Eleanor Vance. Should be expecting you. She's in the living room. Reports hearing a child in a wardrobe in the master bedroom. 10 to 4 Central." I relayed this to Eleanor. "They're there, Eleanor. They're at your door." "Oh, thank heavens." I heard a faint shuffling sound, as if she was getting up. Then nothing for a few seconds. I expected to hear her talking to the officers, the sound of a door opening. Instead, Officer Miller's voice came back on the radio, sounding puzzled. "Central, we have a male subject at the door. Advises he's the homeowner." My brow furrowed. "A male subject? Ask him if Eleanor Vance is present, or if there's any female resident." A brief pause. "Central, negative. Male states he lives here alone with his son. Says there's no Eleanor Vance here, no female resident at all." A cold dread, far deeper than before, began to spread through me. I looked at the address on my screen. 1427 Hawthorne Lane. Confirmed. "Eleanor," I said into the phone. "Eleanor, are you there? The officers are saying a man answered the door. They say there's no woman there." Her voice came back, faint and laced with utter confusion. "What? No, that's impossible. I'm here. This is my house. I'm looking out the living room window. I can see the patrol car." "Unit 214, I said, my voice tight. "Caller on the line insists she is inside the residence. States she can see your vehicle." This was getting stranger by the second. "Central, the male subject is adamant. He's looking pretty confused himself. Says no one else should be here." Miller sounded wary. "Says his name is Arthur Collins. He's got ID." "Eleanor," I pressed. "What does this man look like? The one at the door?" I can't see him clearly from here. Just his shape." Her voice was trembling violently now. "But this is my house. I've lived here for 20 years. My husband, Robert, we bought it together. 214, the caller's name is Eleanor Vance. She says her late husband was Robert. Does the name Vance mean anything to Mr. Collins?" I waited, listening to the silence on Eleanor's end. Then Miller's response. "Central, Mr. Collins says he bought this house 3 years ago, from an estate sale. Previous owner was deceased. A Robert Vance." My heart hammered against my ribs. Estate sale. Previous owner deceased. Robert Vance. That meant Eleanor Vance. "Eleanor," I said softly. "The officer said Mr. Collins bought the house 3 years ago, from the estate of a Robert Vance." "Eleanor, your husband's name was Robert, you said." There was a long, drawn-out silence on her end. Just the sound of her breathing, growing more ragged, more panicked. It sounded like she was hyperventilating. "Eleanor, can you hear me?" Then a choked sound. No, that can't be right. Robert, he passed last year. Not 3 years ago. I was with him." Her voice was dissolving into confusion and fear. This is my home." This was spiraling out of my control, out of any recognizable scenario. But the child was still the priority. "Unit 214, I said, pushing down my own disorientation. Regardless of the caller's status, the initial report was a child trapped in a wardrobe, possibly abused. Mr. Collins states he has a son. You need to verify the welfare of that child. 10-4 Central. Mr. Collins confirms he has a 7-year-old son. Says his name is Leo. Says he's asleep upstairs. Ask him if you can see the boy, just to confirm he's okay. Given the nature of the call we received, there was a pause. I could hear Miller talking to Collins, muffled. Then Miller came back on. Central, subject is refusing. Says the boy is fine, doesn't want him woken up. He's getting a bit agitated. Eleanor? I whispered into my phone. Are you still there? A faint, broken sound, like a gasp. I don't understand what's happening. 214, reiterate that due to the specifics of the call, we need to see the child. It's a welfare check. My training kicked in. We had cause. More muffled conversation. Then Miller's voice, sharper now. Central, subject is becoming uncooperative, denying access. He's raising his voice. Then, a sudden change in his tone. Hold on. Central, did you hear that? Hear what? 214? A sound. From upstairs. Faint, like a cry. Or a thump. My gut twisted. Eleanor, I said quickly. The wardrobe you heard the knocking from, which room is it in? The master bedroom, she whispered. Upstairs. At the end of the hall. 214, the original report specified the master bedroom wardrobe. Upstairs. Did you hear the sound from that direction? Affirmative, Central. Definitely from upstairs. Subject is now trying to block the doorway. Partner is moving to restrain. The line with Eleanor was still open. I could hear her ragged, panicked gasps. It was like listening to someone drowning. Then, chaos erupted on the radio, shouting, "Sir, step aside. Police, don't resist." Sounds of a struggle. My own pulse was roaring in my ears. I gripped the phone tighter. Central, we're making entry to check on the child. Officer Miller's voice, strained. Subject is non-compliant. I heard footsteps pounding on the radio feed. Officers moving quickly. Upstairs. Check the bedrooms. Eleanor was making soft, whimpering sounds now. They're in my house, but they can't see me. Robert, what's happening to me, Robert? 214. Status? I demanded. Checking rooms. Master bedroom at the end of the hall. Doors closed. A pause. Then, it's locked. Eleanor, was your bedroom door locked when you left it? Yes, I locked it, she stammered. 214. Caller states she locked that door. Okay, Central. We're announcing, then forcing if no response. I heard them call out, "Police! Occupant! Open the door!" Silence. Then a thud. Another. The sound of a door splintering. "We're in," Miller shouted. "Wardrobe. It's closed. Oh God. Central, we found him. Child in the wardrobe. He's alive. Conscious but terrified. Small boy. Matches the description." A wave of dizzying relief washed over me. So strong it almost buckled me. He was real. The boy was real. They got to him. Arthur Collins was now in deep, deep trouble. But then the other part of it crashed back in. Eleanor. I said, my voice hoarse. They found him. The little boy, Leo. He's safe. They have him. Her response was a broken whisper, almost inaudible. Leo. His name is Leo. He was real. Yes, Eleanor, he was real. But the officers, they still don't see you. Mr. Collins says you're not there. Eleanor. Where are you in the house right now? A long, shaky sigh. I was in the living room, by the window, but when they came in, they walked right past me, right through where I was standing. Her voice was filled with a dawning, unutterable horror. They didn't see me. He didn't see me. Eleanor, I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly say? The wardrobe, the master bedroom, that's where I heard him so clearly. I spent so much time in that room. After Robert, her voice trailed off. Then, a new note of terror, colder than before. If Mr. Collins bought the house 3 years ago, from Robert's estate, and Robert died, then when did I die? The question hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. I had no answer. My dispatcher's manual had no protocol for this. I don't feel anything, she whispered, her voice sounding distant now, frayed. It's like I'm fading. I can't see the room clearly anymore. It's cold. Eleanor, stay with me. Can you tell me anything else? Can you describe what you see around you now? My professional instincts were useless, grasping at straws. Her voice was barely a breath. Just dark and wind, so much wind. Then a click. The line went dead. Eleanor, I yelled into the receiver. Eleanor, static. My hand was shaking as I hit the redial button for the incoming number. It rang, once, twice, then it connected. But there was no voice, just a sound. A faint, hollow, whistling sound, like wind blowing through a cracked window pane, or across the mouth of an empty bottle. It was a sound I'd heard before, sometimes on bad connections, but this was different. This felt empty, desolate. I listened for a full minute, my heart pounding, a cold sweat on my brow. The sound didn't change, just that soft, sighing wind. I hung up. The officers were dealing with Collins, getting medics for Leo. The immediate crisis was over. The boy was safe. That's what mattered. That's what I told myself. But Eleanor, I ran the number through our system again. It was a landline, registered to 1427 Hawthorne Lane. It had been for over 20 years, registered to Robert and Eleanor Vance. It was probably disconnected after the estate sale, but somehow she had called from it, or through it. The report I filed was complex. I focused on the tangible, the call, the child endangerment, the successful rescue. I omitted the parts about Eleanor's apparent non-existence, her dawning realization. Who would believe it? They'd send me for psych eval. Maybe I should go. But I know what I heard. I know how real her fear was. And I know that, whatever she was, she saved that little boy's life. She reached across whatever barrier separates us from whatever she is. And she made us listen. I still work the midnight shift. The calls still come in. But now, sometimes, when there's a strange silence on the line, or a whisper I can't quite make out, I feel a different kind of chill. I think of Eleanor Vance and the hollow wind on the other end of the line. Kevin has been my stepfather since marrying my mother in 2024. Mom met him in 2022, 2 years after Dad passed away. Kevin was a godsend, truth be told. Stereotypically, stepfathers are loathsome, right? Comically villainous? Well, I was kind of hoping for that, so I'd have a reason to dislike him. Frustratingly, however, I found that I really didn't hate the guy. And I was a grouchy 15-year-old whose grief was only just starting to dim. So all of the ingredients were there. I should have hated my stepdad, but I didn't. Kevin was nice. Kevin was perfect. It took until spring of this year for that illusion to slip, for me to learn of my stepfather's special interest, bottlenose dolphins. I was relieved, initially, to learn of his little quirk. I was surprised that it had taken 3 years for Kevin's oddness to come to light, but I was simply glad to finally have evidence of an abnormality. Having some sort of flaw made him seem, in my eyes, more human. I was wrong. Shortly before starting university last September, Kevin took me fishing, despite my gentle reminder that I don't really like the activity that much. Ironically, my older sister, Becky, was keener to give it a whirl, but Kevin called it an opportunity for male bonding. That whole thing rubbed her the wrong way. I, on the other hand, was more than happy to add misogyny to the list of my stepfather's imperfections. Why was I so gleeful about finding something wrong with Kevin? Did I always know, deep down, that he wasn't quite right? And, if so, did I just want a tame explanation for that churning feeling in my gut? Something that didn't scare me? Peaceful out here, isn't it, Craig? Kevin said as we both dangled our rods into the water. I shrugged. Sure. Don't worry, he chuckled. You'll be at university soon. Clubbing, drinking, making mistakes. You'll be away from your boring dad. Is it okay if I call myself that? I stifled a frustrated sigh. You always ask me that, and the answer is always yes. I know, but you still refuse to use the word, said Kevin, and that makes me sad. I awkwardly tried to change the topic. So, why do you love fishing so much? My stepfather's face lit up. Nature, Craig. It's a beautiful thing. Terrible sometimes, but beautiful. Perfectly balanced. Perfectly designed. Do you want to know my favorite animal in the world? It was an odd question, something a child might ask. His giddy tone was quite childlike too. Still, I nodded. The bottlenose dolphin, Kevin whispered, looking longingly at the water. That's why I convinced your mother to go on our lovely little Welsh getaway before you go to university. I want to see them swimming off the coast. God, I used to go every year and it's been 3 now. I'm desperate. But this is nice. Really nice. Talking to you about the OL bottlenose. I've spent the last 3 years chewing your mother's ear off about him. So it's refreshing to finally have a chance to tell somebody new. The bottlenose is my favorite animal. Maybe my favorite thing in the whole world. I struggled to contain a smirk at Kevin's impassioned rant. Given that this dolphin's so important to you, I'm surprised I've not heard you talk about it before. My stepfather sighed. A deep, sorrowful sigh. Well, not everybody understands, Craig. I've been vulnerable in the past. Opened up about my passion. Shared this side of myself. And many times I've been burnt. I snorted with laughter, but tried to play it off as a cough. However, Kevin fell silent after that, and it wasn't a pleasant silence. There was contemplation, but it bubbled with rage. I could see my stepfather seething beneath his face's crumbling veneer of pleasantry. Anyhow, 1 week later, the 4 of us arrived at our Airbnb in Cardigan Bay, North Wales. Whilst Mum and Kevin booked a boating excursion along the coast, I spilt the beans to Becky. Prepare yourself, I said. On our fishing trip, I learnt that Kevin's really into dolphins. So am I, she replied. No, he's really into them, I insisted with a grin. My sister lifted an eyebrow. What do you mean? I smirked and nodded my head at our stepfather, who was giddily bouncing from foot to foot whilst he and Mum huddled together in front of the iPad. Becky smiled. Well, that's kind of cute, isn't it? I shook my head, trying to swallow the slight lump rising up my throat. Something about that day still didn't sit well with me. I guess so. At first I thought so, but he got weird about it. See, I made the mistake of laughing, and then I don't know. That's what he gets for choosing you over me, Becky giggled. Male bonding isn't all it's cracked up to be, eh? I would have been sweet and understanding. I wouldn't have laughed at his dolphin boner. I brayed with laughter. Please, never say those words together again. Why are you two chuckling? Asked Mum as she and Kevin walked over to us in the kitchen. Becky silently mouthed dolphin boner to me, and I tried desperately to suppress my grin. Nothing, I eventually managed to answer. We're just excited for this boat trip. Our mother raised an eyebrow. My 2 teenage children are excited to spend the day with us? Well, that's not suspicious at all. Teenage? Becky's nearly 20. I pointed out. She's old now. You're both fetuses to us? Mum sighed. scooping up her coat from the counter. Now, shall we go for a little mooch around town before the sun scuttles away? We've got an hour before our booking. Kevin was distant whilst we wandered around the shops. His gaze belonged to the sea, which Becky had clocked too. We shared a few knowing grins, realizing that he was daydreaming about those bottlenose dolphins, and he ended up dragging us down to the dock about 10 minutes before our booking. We're going to have the boat all to ourselves, whispered Kevin dreamily. Well, not quite, came a voice from behind us. We turned to see a stout man with a gray, bushy beard waddling down the wooden pier towards us. Dave! Kevin roared jubilantly before embracing him. That's Captain Dave to you, the man corrected, and the two laughed. Becky frowned. You know him? They're old friends, Mum said. That's how we got the boat all to ourselves. Got yourselves a good discount too, Dave chuckled. Some would think being friends for 30 years entitles a man to more than 30% off, Kevin quipped. Dave rolled his eyes. Stop trying to bleed my dry, why bastard? Come on, folks. Hop on board. It was a beautiful day. That's one of the main things I remember. The sun beat down mercilessly, slow roasting us. I sat by the taffrail, letting the sea breeze cool me down a little, and that was when I saw it. A gray, shimmering fin, rising and falling rhythmically above and below the surface of the water. I opened my mouth to say something, but, "OH, it's beautiful," yelled Kevin at the top of his lungs. Kathy, do you see this? I see it. My mum chuckled from beside him. The two of them were cuddling beside me, watching as the creature danced alongside our boat, and I turned to look for my sister. She wasn't on the deck. You need to get and fetch Becky, Kevin insisted. I nodded, but when I reached the entryway to the cabin, I found only Captain Dave standing behind the wheel. He nodded at me with the slightest smile, and I felt unnerved. I felt displaced. I felt just as I had on that fishing trip. Where is she? I asked. Said she wanted a nap, Dave replied, nodding again, this time towards the door at his right, which led to quarters below deck. Don't think she had much interest in the dolphins. I furrowed my brow and barged past the captain, before throwing the door open. Down 4 steps, there was a cramped room which contained a small table, littered with takeaway boxes, and a single bed at the back. Becky lay on it, chest rising and falling with the gentleness of the dolphin's fin. I managed to calm my breathing a little. Bottlenose dolphins are special animals, Craig. The voice came from behind me, and I turned to see Kevin closing the door. It's a little weird for my sister to be sleeping in the captain's bed, isn't it? I asked. Kevin ignored me. You're missing the dolphins, boy. Boy, he'd never called me that before, and there was a curtness to the tone, a bite. Kevin, I don't care how well you know Dave. I don't want my sister to sleep down here, I said, before turning towards the bed and kneeling down. Wake up, Becky. She's going to be resting for a while, Kevin whispered. Then came the click of the door locking, and I felt a pang of fear in my chest like nothing I've ever felt before. It was a blade that drove through my ribs, twisting tightly into my heart. I struggled to breathe, struggled to move, but I managed to twist my jittery, half-paralyzed body towards Kevin. I sat on the floor, back against the bed, forming a weak and flimsy barrier between the approaching man and my sister. Mom, I weakly croaked, voice failing me. Mum's sleeping too, he whispered, but you're awake. You want to hear me talk about my favorite animal, don't you? I tried to shake my head, but I was frozen in fear. I'd been telling myself for months that turning 18 meant I'd finally become an adult. However, in that moment I was a boy, frightened and alone. As I told you out on the lake, nature is a beautiful thing, Kevin continued, taking slow steps towards me. It demands balance. We're part of that, you and me, human beings. You know, there's so much to be learnt from the animals around us. Bottlenose dolphins are our greatest teachers. Now, it isn't just about their intelligence. their social hierarchy, their proclivity for aggression. No, they're related to us in another way. You see, they understand that cruelty serves a purpose, that nature bends to no rules, no ethical standards. Do you know what they do when eyeing a taken woman, Craig? A taken woman. Those words iced my body even more firmly to the spot, foreshadowed the horrifying revelation that I had already started to, in part, predict. I curled up tightly against the bed as Kevin took another step closer. I'll tell you then, Kevin sighed. Bottlenose dolphins commit infanticide as part of sexual selection. In other words, a male will kill a female's existing offspring in order to induce estrus, return her to heat, to a state of fertility. Then he will mate with her and create fresh offspring. He will ascend to become the prime male, extinguishing the previous male's bloodline. Now, humans aren't dolphins.
Im no fool, crutch.
But there is, I think, something to be learnt from the magnificent bottlenose. You see, much like them, our intelligence very nearly gets in the way of our baser instincts. But in the right circumstances, nature overrides our silly, emotional minds. And I've found, time and time again, that taking away a human mother's cubs reawakens something in her. That broodiness, that desperation to procreate, to protect the family line, to ensure the species' survival. It gives the male a chance to sire her next offspring. Of course, there will be immense grief, but out of that grief is born a new desire, a new purpose, and I will be there to take the reins, to start a new family with your mother. I've been patient these past 5 years, but the time is right. I managed to splutter a few more words. Please, I don't understand. Kevin's face surveyed me neutrally, with thin lips and eyes dark and unfeeling. That was what your father said. My heart halted. The clamp had tightened, finally bringing it to a stop. What did you say? I hoarsely whispered. Kevin knelt down before me. There was only a yard or so between us. I saw you, your sister, and your mother, he softly explained. Saw the 3 of you visiting him in the hospital. Saw how happy the 4 of you were. A lovely little family. And I thought, why shouldn't I have that? So I made it happen, Craig. He probably would have woken from the coma, given enough time. But I wasn't going to let that happen. My heart restarted, only to pound more furiously than ever as I stared into those terrifying eyes. Realized that this was no nightmare, that Kevin was not lying. My father hadn't died due to malfunctioning equipment. As the hospital had claimed, this monster had intervened, had planned to take my dad's family, had succeeded. I started to feel the life return to my limbs, to my hands. I started to move my right hand along the floor and wrapped it around the clunky, steel-toed boot lying on the floor. For what it's worth, I always liked you, Craig, Kevin promised. But we have to take notes from nature. I'll never be anything more than Catherine's provider until I clean the slate completely. Your father isn't gone yet. Not until you and Becky are gone. As Kevin's beady eyes glinted in the orange glow of the swinging bulb above, I sensed that he was moments from pouncing. So I swung the toe end of the boot straight at Kevin's temple. He cried out and fell to the floor, massaging his wounded head. The boot hadn't been enough to put him down for good, but it had given me time to get to my feet. I leapt forwards and delivered a blow to his face, with one well-meaning kick, which sent the back of his skull clunking against the dining table's side leg. That left him still. I rushed up the stairs, unlocked the door, then burst into the captain's cabin. So, have you... Dave began. He stopped mid-sentence upon seeing not his friend, as he'd expected, but the teenage boy who, presumably, wasn't supposed to surface from below deck ever again. And lying silently on the seating by the taffrail was my mother. She had clearly been drugged too. The water bottles, I thought, realizing I'd turned down the offering from Captain Dave when we first got on the boat. He'd looked disgruntled about that. If I'd taken that bottle, Becky and I would have likely never woken up. Captain Dave eyed me for a moment, or it could have been several seconds, before flying towards me in a rage. I ducked and flew under his arms before running out onto the deck. I ran right up to the back of the boat, stopping at the rail. There was a trio of dolphins leaping out of the water behind our boat, which trundled slowly along the coast. When I turned, Dave was barreling towards me. He was far more heavyset than me and would have easily bested me in a fight if he'd slowed his roll, if he'd not charged towards me at such speed. I screamed as I threw myself to the side. The captain's arm caught me, but it was too late. Too much forward momentum. He fell off the back of the boat into the water. The vessel started to leave the man behind, slowly, given that we were pushing forwards at a crawl, and we drifted slightly to one side while now unmanned. Meanwhile, trailing behind us was the overboard captain. As he flailed about in the water, disrupting the dolphin's route, the animals stopped swimming and began to push their noses out of the water, began to release distressed trills. Then there came a clunking sound, and the engine cut out. I turned to see a heavily panting Kevin come out of the cabin, boat keys in hand. "Help me!" cried Captain Dave from about 20 yards behind our boat. "Get me away from these damn animals." Kevin eyed me with rage, pointing the keys towards me. "You!" This time, I didn't have the element of surprise on my side. Didn't have a weapon at hand. I wanted to jump overboard and swim to shore. Swim for help. But I was terrified that this hellish man would hurt my sister, would take my mother away, never to be seen again. So, I tried to protect myself with arms over my face, but the hulking man quickly tore them away. I shrieked in terror as he put my neck in a stranglehold and pushed me over the edge of the taffrail, head dangling upside down over the back of the boat. I eyed the world from a topsy-turvy perspective. Captain Dave swam towards us. From my perspective, looking as if he might drop from the ocean above into the sky below. I could only hope. He was closing the distance between him and the boat, and I knew that I had no chance of surviving an attack from those two men combined. But then I noticed those same 3 bottlenose dolphins. They were still squeaking and moaning irritably, clearly frustrated with the human who had disrupted their swim, and their fins were trailing after him. One of the animals suddenly pushed its face out of the water and lunged towards his arm. Captain Dave cried out in pain as the animal's teeth sank into his skin, and as he thrashed about in agony, blood staining the water, the other 2 bottlenoses joined their friend. That was what saved me. I was seconds from blacking out when Kevin's hands loosened on my neck. "Shit," Kevin hissed. As I pulled my head back upright, I saw the man rummaging around in the cabin. Then he ran back across the deck with a deadly instrument in hand. A spear gun. "Don't move," my stepfather warned as he raised the weapon. "Or I'll put one of these in you, and that'll ruin everything. Understand?" Before waiting for a response from me, Kevin fired a shot into the water. There followed a yelp of agony, and when I turned to look over the back rail, I saw the spear protruding from one dolphin's glistening skin. Its 2 companions began to release more agitated sounds. Sounds like pierced my ears and filled my heart with primal dread. These were war cries. As the bloody Captain Dave attempted a one-armed front stroke towards the boat, one of the animals hissed aggressively. I've never heard such a terrifying sound. Before, they'd been attacking Captain Dave simply out of annoyance. This time, they were angry. One of the creatures disappeared underwater, and I saw the captain's fate before he did. But his eyes eventually widened as something took hold of his feet. He released a brief scream as the dolphin dragged him below the surface. "David!" Kevin yelled, loading the spear gun to attack the 3rd and final bottlenose. The dolphin floated alongside its limp and lifeless friend, which was bleeding out into the ocean. I believe that these creatures are incredibly intelligent. I felt its emotion, felt its sorrow as it looked upon its dead friend. Most terrifyingly of all, I felt the surviving dolphin's understanding. As it eyed my deranged stepfather, it knew that this man was responsible for its friend's death. Call it some instinctual reflex, but I shuffled away from the taffrail, crawled backwards on my behind across the deck, eyed by a scowling Kevin. "Don't even think about running away," the man growled, turning his back to the ocean and facing me spear gun. "When I'm finished with that thing, I'll—" A tremendous splash of water was followed by a gray shape that half blotted out the dazzling sun. Then, with a level of acrobatic accuracy that left me stunned into both awe and fear, the creature snapped its jaws around my stepfather's midsection. Kevin screeched in pain as he was dragged over the back rail and pulled below the depths of the ocean, along with the captain. I released a guttural moan, not sure whether my terror came from the sheer power of those sea-dwelling animals or the insidiousness of my stepfather. Both, and I was too frightened to stand for a long while, too frightened that those mighty animals might return to the surface for me, might kill us all out of sheer aggression or the misplaced belief that we were culpable for their friend's death. Eventually, as the sun started to set, and the boat drifted aimlessly along the coast, I heard the door creak open behind me. A drowsy Becky stumbled out, asking where the captain and Kevin had gone. I began to blubber inconsolably, unable to explain a thing to her, and she phoned the police from the boat. Mum came around shortly afterwards, and the Coast Guard came to rescue us within half an hour. Even after explaining everything to my distraught mother and sister, it doesn't feel real. Even after the police investigation found the mutilated, savaged corpses of Kevin and David on a beach 300 yards away, it didn't feel real. I didn't tell them what Kevin told me about Dad, that he killed him. That's my burden to bear. The rest of the horror is too much for them already. Kevin was right though. Whether one looks at human beings or bottlenose dolphins, the fact remains the same. Nature is a beautiful thing. Beautiful and terrible. I haven't spoken to my brother in over 6 years. No fights, no drama, just silence. One day he stopped replying, stopped calling, stopped existing in my life. Our parents passed within months of each other, and even then, he never showed up. So when I got a voicemail from his landlord saying they hadn't seen him in weeks, I should have just deleted it. But I didn't. I found a spare key taped behind the rusting electric meter, just like he always joked about when we were kids. If I ever disappear, check behind the meter. I wish I hadn't remembered that. The house smelled like mold and metal, stale, dead air. Every light I flicked on buzzed before going dim again. Nothing looked disturbed. No signs of a break-in, no shattered glass, no chaos. Just stillness. That was somehow worse. The fridge was empty. So was the sink. The only thing running was a box fan in the living room, pointed toward an armchair that faced nothing. Just the wall. A damp towel was thrown over the seat. I didn't touch it. I walked into his bedroom. It was too clean. Dust lined everything, but the bed was made, the clothes were folded, and the closet was empty, except for the freezer. It wasn't in the kitchen, it was in the back room. A standalone, chest-style deep freezer, padlocked shut. That alone should have been enough to turn around and leave. But I didn't. I found the bolt cutters in the garage. The lock snapped like it had been rusting for years. I had to grip the lid hard. There was frost sealing it shut. And when I opened it, the first thing I saw was a Ziploc bag full of human teeth. Loose, some bloody, some cracked at the root like they'd been yanked hard and fast. Underneath that, jars. Mason jars filled with meat. They weren't labeled, but one had a fingernail floating at the top. The color of the flesh was wrong. Gray-pink, mottled. The smell. Jesus, the smell hit me like boiling bleach and rotting copper. There were bones. Small ones. Finger bones. A wrist, maybe. My vision started tunneling. I don't remember standing up, but I was suddenly in the hallway, holding a jar, the lid slick with something oily. I threw it through the bathroom mirror. That's when I saw the photos. Taped to the underside of the mirror were Polaroids. My brother, shirtless, smeared with something dark, kneeling beside bodies, bodies missing chunks, pieces. Some were missing faces. One of them was posed like it was praying. In all of them, he was smiling. He looked so proud. I tried calling the cops. No service. I bolted, left everything behind. I made it home 2 hours later, shaking so bad I couldn't hold my keys. I called the police the next morning, but when they went to the house, it was empty.
No teeth, no jars, no pouleroids.
Not even the freezer, like it never existed. They tracked the landlord who swore he never called me, said no one had rented that house in years. He thought it had been condemned, but I have the voicemail and a tooth. I don't know what to do with it. I keep it in a plastic bag under my bed. It's not the same as the others. It's cracked and discolored, with a silver filling in the back. I know it's my brother's, because when we were kids, he knocked that exact tooth out on a bike ramp and Mom spent $2,000 getting it fixed. I remember watching the blood pour from his mouth like he liked it. I haven't told anyone about the tooth. I wanted to believe I was wrong. Maybe it wasn't his. Maybe the photos were fake. Maybe the jars were props. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing, until the meat showed up on my porch, wrapped in butcher paper. No return address, no name, just a greasy, hand-scrawled note. You forgot dinner. I didn't even open it. I threw the whole thing into a public dumpster 6 blocks away. But that night, I heard something chewing outside my bedroom window. It wasn't a raccoon. It was slow, vet, like something gnawing bone. I waited until sunrise to look. Just a smear of blood on the windowsill. Human teeth marks in the wood. Then the smell came back. That same metal-sweet stink from the freezer. Clung to my skin, my sheets, even the inside of my mouth. I started gagging in the shower. Blood clots came up in my spit. I couldn't eat for 2 days without puking. And then I started dreaming. Dreams of the freezer lid slamming shut on me, of being trapped in the dark, frozen with things that still whispered, things that moved. Dreams of my brother standing over me with bolt cutters, smiling like he did in the Polaroids. I've been saving the good parts, he says. You always were the favorite. One night I woke up with my mouth full of something soft and gritty. It was a tongue, not mine. I screamed so loud the neighbors called 911. Cops showed up, took one look at my blood-soaked mouth and bathroom sink full of vomit and decided I was having a breakdown. No tongue was ever found, but they put me on a list, sent a social worker. She came by 2 days later, cheerful and chirpy, offering help. So I let her in. I don't know how to explain what I saw next. Her clipboard had teeth embedded in it. Real ones, still bloody, pressed into the leather like someone had bitten it over and over. She didn't mention it. She just smiled. Too wide, too long, like her skin was stretching to keep up. Your brother says hi, she whispered as she walked out the door. I haven't slept since. The freezer's outside my building now. Same dent on the lid, same rust pattern, but this time the lock's on the inside, and I can hear knocking from within. I started boarding up my door yesterday. I don't leave my apartment. My phone buzzes with unknown numbers every night at 3:17 a.m. I don't answer anymore. The voicemails are just chewing sounds, slurping, gulping. Last night, I looked in the mirror and saw something lodged in the back of my throat. I reached in with tweezers and pulled out a piece of paper, soaked in bile. It read, "You'll taste just like Mom." Tonight, I finally opened the bag under my bed, the one with his tooth. I don't remember taking it out, but when I came to, it was in my mouth, wedged in perfectly. No blood, no pain, like it had always belonged there. I ran to the bathroom mirror, heart jackhammering in my chest. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight when the power cut out. The face staring back wasn't mine. It was his, not a hallucination, not a reflection. His eyes, his mouth, his goddamn smile. I screamed and tore the tooth out with pliers. Blood poured from my gums, dripped onto the sink, pooled around the base. I heard the knocking again, from inside the mirror this time. Then his voice, soft and close, like he was breathing down my neck. Took you long enough. That's when I understood. The teeth, the jars, the tongue, the smell. He wasn't preserving bodies. He was preserving himself, piece by piece, in others, in me. The freezer wasn't to hide the dead. It was a delivery system. I was never meant to find him. I was meant to become him. Until 3 weeks ago, I was living what most would consider a simple and happy life. I'm a stay-at-home dad, probably on Reddit more than I care to admit. I met my wife, Noriko, or Nori for short, in Osaka, Japan, 12 years ago during a work trip for an advertising agency. Shortly after we started dating, Nori was offered a senior position at her company's newly opened NYC branch. At the time, I was living in Connecticut but working remotely, so it was an easy decision to move in together in NYC. Plus, her mother has lived in Queens for the past 30 years, so it just made sense. 3 years later, we got married. The following spring, we had our son, Nicholas. Again, I'd like to emphasize that we've lived what I'd call a pretty normal life. We've had our ups and downs, but have never experienced anything quite like what I'm about to share. 3 weeks ago, Nicholas pulled this little gizmo out of his backpack. At first glance, it reminded me of a Tamagotchi, a little piece of plastic that easily could fit in your pocket. 3 or 4 little buttons on the bottom and a cheap display up top. However, the design wasn't colorful like I remember Tamagotchis being. It was obsidian black. From a distance, you could easily mistake it for some kind of medical device. And even stranger, I never could actually see any pet on the display. Either way, Nori and I hadn't any clue where he got it from. We presume a friend at school must have gifted it to him. He called it his tether pet and was nothing short of obsessed with it. I mean, I could understand. I remember getting a Tamagotchi for Christmas when I was his age. It felt like you were responsible for some other life form. Your relationship with the toy often felt like a life or death situation. Nikki was certainly under a similar spell. So that same Sunday, we piled into Nori's Corolla and took the BQ Expressway to Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens to visit her mom, Aki, who's suffering from bone cancer. Nikki was in the back seat, attending to his tether pet. "How's your Tamagotchi, buddy?" "What? Your little pet there." Nikki is normally eager to yap Nori and I's ear off about whatever his fascination of the day is. But for whatever reason, his tone was flat and serious when discussing his tether pet, Fine. "Oh yeah? Do you have a name for him?" "It's a girl." "Oh cool. What's her name?" "Baba." It came with the name. I didn't get to pick it. Nori tried to play along. "Baba? That's cute." "Not really. She's always hungry. And whenever she poops, I have to clean it up." I let out a laugh. "Reminds me of somebody I used to know." "No, Dad. It's a lot of responsibility. You wouldn't understand." Nori and I laughed. Oh, the simple joys of parenthood. We arrived at Aki's room only to be held back by a couple of nurses. They asked us to wait while Grandma's bedpan was changed. It saddened me to think about how Aki had wilted over the past year. It didn't seem long ago she was in our living room bouncing Nikki on her knee, singing that silly old horse racing anthem. Boom da da boom da da boom boom boom, boom da da boom da da boom boom boom. Nikki loved that. He'd blow up in a fit of laughter every time. Now she couldn't even get out of her hospital bed. Crushed me, but I guess it had happened to me someday too. Before I could get too melancholy, a nurse opened the door with a smile. "She's ready to see you now." We stepped inside and there was Aki, still glowing, albeit dimly, with her usual tender smile. Nikki seemed to snap out of his fog with her in sight, running to her bedside. "Grandma!" Aki tried to roll over and muster a hug for his reception, but it was clearly too much for her. Nori and I followed close behind. This had become a very difficult ritual for Nori to get used to. Aki told us about how her treatment had been going, how she was always in pain, but that there was still a chance she could get through it. I don't know why, but I never had any real faith that she would. I guess I've just seen this scenario play out one too many times. In my experience, at least, it never ended how we all prayed each night that it would. After some more light conversation and updates on work, school, etc., Nicky pulled out his tether pet. "Oh, how are you liking the new toy Grandma gave you?" Nori and I looked at each other flabbergasted. Aki gave it to him? She could barely get out of bed, let alone go buy Nicky a toy from the store. "Aki, where did you get that toy from?" I asked. "Oh, I think one of the doctors gave it to me." Yes, it's something they're giving to a lot of the patients around here. It didn't make any sense, but before I could ask more questions, a nurse came in and told us our time was up and that Aki needed to get some rest. Nori and I had a couple conversations theorizing about why the hospital would have given her the toy. Maybe it was some charity connected to the hospital? Either way, we had more important things to worry about, so as the days went on, we let it go. Everything in our lives continued as normal until the day Nicky lost his tether pet. It was last week Friday. We were just sitting down for dinner when Nicky comes shuffling into the room looking on the verge of tears. "I can't find my tether pet." Nori was setting the table. She had really went all out for us that evening. "Okay, well, after dinner we can all take a look together to find it." Observing my son more closely, he wasn't just upset. He looked devastated. "You don't understand, Mom. She could die if I don't. At this point, I decided it was time to do some father energy. I took a knee. "Listen, Nicholas, I understand your toy is important to you, but it's just that, right? Toy. So let's sit down and eat the dinner Mama made us and we can take a look after. Okay?" I gave him that stern but tender look a father gives to ensure his way. Nicky nodded solemnly. I gave him a hug and a rub on the back. All throughout dinner, Nicky avoided our usual conversation starters. How was school? How was soccer practice? What do you want to do this weekend? Etc. It was clear his mind was racing. It really rubbed me the wrong way. I don't remember ever being this stressed about my Tamagotchi. Just then, Nori's phone rang. She moved to the edge of kitchen to take the call. I watched as her face slowly settled into a more serious expression as she listened to the other end. She responded with simple, short acknowledgments of what she was hearing as she walked over to the living room. She hung up and began to put on her coat. "Everything okay, honey?" I mouthed to her silently, "Aki." She nodded. "I think it should be fine, but if it becomes serious, I'll call you." "Sounds good." I looked to Nicky and provided a distraction. "Shall we look for Baba?" Nicky nodded his head frantically, clearly unwilling to wait an even second longer. We looked around the house for quite some time. He was certain he had come home with it, so I was pretty determined to help him find it. It really felt like looking for a needle in a haystack, though. It wasn't until we were just about to give up that we found it, fallen beneath the shoe rack near his backpack. I thought for sure we'd have some small celebration of our efforts, but Nicky didn't even smile. He just picked it up and began to shake his head. "Ah, man. What is it, buddy?" "Just a lot of build-up." "Oh? Of what?" "Poop." I laughed. "It's not funny, Dad." She could have suffocated. "From the poop." I laughed even harder. I've always had a stupid sense of humor. Nicky, presumably offended by my not taking this seriously, retreated up to his room. Alone, I decided this would be good a time as any to pop on an old samurai movie for my own selfish pleasures. Plus, the 3-hour runtime would keep me up long enough in case Nori called. But about halfway into the movie, she came in the door, sopping wet. I guess it had started raining. She explained that everything ended up okay. A false alarm. I cut the movie short and we went to bed. As we laid together under the sheets, it was becoming clear she couldn't fall asleep. "What's wrong, babe?" When I got to Sinai today, Mom had an accident. Oh, like she shit herself. I wasn't sure how to respond, but luckily she continued. What if we get so old or sick that some stranger has to literally wipe our ass? I chuckled. I mean, we probably will. She rolled over and looked at me with playful concern. I don't want a stranger to wipe my ass. So you're saying it has to be me? She finally broke into a giggle. Well, how about we just promise to take care of each other? Then I kissed her on the cheek. Deal. The next few days were normal, well, the new normal. Nicky seemingly had lost all interest in having friends over with his ongoing tether pet responsibilities. In fact, we even got an email from his soccer coach that he was absent-mindedly monitoring his device while on the sidelines. We used to get emails that he needed to stop hogging the ball so much. One evening, as we put him to bed, we explained that if his pet continued to affect his school participation, that we'd have no choice but to confiscate it from him. He appeared gravely disturbed by this notion. That'd make you a murderer. It was such an absurd thing to say, but he said it with such conviction. A conviction that I don't believe an 8-year-old should be able to feel. I'd soon understand why. Yesterday, around noon, Nicky's at school, Nori's at work. I get a call from the principal. Everything's fine. We just wanted to let you know that we needed to confiscate a toy from your son today, as it was distracting him from class work. No parent ever enjoys these calls. I apologize. We've talked to him about this before. We'll have another chat about it tonight and make sure he gets the message. Would you like us to hold onto it for now? Or send him home with it? God, I wish I could go back in time. Hold on to it. I knew Nicky would be furious, but as a father, I assumed this was a good opportunity for some tough love. Sure enough, when Nicky got home, he was in a panic. Dad, they took my tether pet away. She's gonna die, Dad. She's gonna die. I got on one knee and gave him my look. Even if it dies, it'll be okay. Because it's just a toy, right? You can always just start over. He started crying, as though really accepting the fact that this could really be the end for his pet. It's not just a toy, Dad. It feels real. It is real. Right then, it all clicked. Nicky wasn't grieving a toy. He was grieving his grandma. I felt a wave of relief, now seemingly able to connect the dots that didn't align to me before. I decided to make this a teaching moment. Nicholas, death is hard. We're all facing that with grandma right now, right? Nicky nodded knowingly. But it's a natural part of life. It's not wrong or bad. It's okay. Can feel sad to let somebody go. But everything really will be okay. Really? Come here, pal. I pulled him in for a hug. Death is what makes life special. It's what makes each moment count. It's a good thing. Snot was running down Nicky's nose onto my shoulder. But I don't want Baba to die. I know. Just then, my phone began to ring. It was Nori. Hey, Han, what's up? The hospital just called me. I think it's happening. My heart stopped. I let go of Nicky. He stepped back, feeling my mood shift. What did they say? She's refused to eat or drink all day, including her medications. Then she had a seizure and has only been getting worse since then. Where's Nicky? Why did this feel familiar? This sensation. It was like déjà vu. I could feel myself freezing up. Nicky tapped my knee. Daddy? What's wrong? I blurted out, Honey, what was that name you called Mom as a baby? Nori seemed frustrated that I had ignored her question. Gabba? Or Baba, I think. Babe, you and Nicky need to meet me at Mount Sinai. A jolt of fear struck down my spine. All of a sudden my mind felt like it was racing ahead of me. My mother-in-law's mortality being connected to a toy was quite the leap, I know. But in that moment, it truly felt crystal clear. How could this happen? It felt like the most basic rules of reality were simply torn out from under me. I had to move. Fast. We're on our way. A wall of obsidian clouds lay heavy above our neighborhood. Nikki and I piled into the car. Daddy, where are we going? We're going to see Grandma, but we'd take a quick detour first. Nikki looked afraid. Is Grandma gonna die, Daddy? I couldn't respond. What could I even say at that point? I'm supposed to be the voice of reason, but I felt like I was losing it. In fact, it had started raining and it took me 6 blocks to realize I didn't have my wipers on. We pulled up to the school entrance. Nikki, wait here. I leaped out of the car before Nikki could question my actions. I ran up to the glass double doors, pounding my fists in the rain. Hey, is there anybody in there? Nothing. I ran around the building towards the gymnasium. Locked. I was really starting to feel hopeless. I noticed a window slightly ajar on the second story of the building. I tried scaling the wall, but the downpour made it impossible. Fuck, this was so stupid. It occurred to me that this really could just be a crazy coincidence. That my mother-in-law was dying right now and I was here in the rain trying to break into an elementary school. But then I noticed a tetherball stand, held down by a weighted tire. I ran over to it, flipped it on its side, and with all my might pushed it towards the base of where the window was. I got a good grip on it and started to climb. If I could balance on the top, I should just be able to reach the windowsill. The rain made my hands slippery, but I just focused on Aki, on Baba. I felt a bellow of thunder rumble through the sky and knew my time was running out. Just as I reached the top, I heard, "Daddy! Daddy!" Nikki was standing at the base of the tetherball pole, clearly scared, drenched in the rain. I called out to him, "Wait right there. I'll be BA dash." Bam! A crack of blinding white light, and then total black. I don't remember anything after that. Just some vague limbo of nothing. I woke up laid up in a hospital bed. My body was aching all over. Craning my neck around, I pieced together that I was in Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens. I had no idea how much time had passed. Nori and Nikki entered the room shortly after. My mind began to fill up with questions, but I was too weak to get them out. I just laid there in a daze. Nori started crying. Nikki stood like a statue, just staring at the floor. I felt like Lazarus, back from the dead. The first question I managed to ask was if Aki was still with us. She wasn't. A nurse joined us and explained to me that I had been struck by lightning on that tetherball pole. They'd need to run some additional testing that evening. My family doesn't know yet, but I am now suffering from electrical cardiomyopathy. My heart is fucked. As I write this, Nori and Nikki are asleep under the roof of our humble home, but I'm still here. I have no idea when I'll get out, and the more I look into my condition, the more I wonder if I even will. But this isn't the reason I'm sharing any of this is now. It's because of what just happened to me only a couple hours ago now. A man came into my room while I was sleeping, unannounced. He looked like a doctor, but didn't state himself as one. Simply, he placed his hand over mine. "Give it to someone you trust." Then he left. I could feel a soft plastic object left behind in my palm, but it was too dark to see. When suddenly a little display lit up. 8-bit text floated across the bright screen. Fa. The text faded, leaving only my own bloodshot eyes gazing back at myself. Nicholas used to call me that. I feel so lost right now. I feel so hopeless. I don't know what any of this means or what I am supposed to do. If anyone has gone through something like this or know someone who has, please tell me. I feel so alone. I don't want to die. I love you, Nori. I love you, Nicholas. I'd always imagined a quieter life. Not retirement exactly, but something slower, softer. After the divorce, London became too loud, too fast, too much. So when a friend offered me his coastal cottage in Cornwall while he was away in Canada, I accepted. No hesitation. It sounded like the sort of place where you could hear yourself think and forget who you'd been. I arrived in mid-October. just as the days were growing short and the sky never seemed to stop spitting rain. The cottage was perched at the edge of a crumbling cliff, the kind of place that looks charming in brochures and slightly haunted in real life. Whitewashed walls, warped windows, and a persistent draft no matter how many logs I threw on the fire. I spent the first few days walking the coastal path, reading, pretending to write. It was peaceful. Lonely too, though I wouldn't admit that until much later. On the fourth evening, I wandered into the village proper. A single high street, a butcher, a post office, and a pub called the King's Shilling. The sign outside was faded, a redcoat handing a coin to a grinning farmer. I pushed open the door, and every head turned. Classic small-town reception. The pub was low-ceilinged and warm, smelling of ale and old stone. A fire snapped lazily in the hearth. Half a dozen older men nursed pints. One woman behind the bar, mid-60s, steel hair in a tight bun. She eyed me for a long second, then poured a Guinness without asking. "You're not from here," she said, placing the pint in front of me. "No," I replied, "just staying a few weeks. Writing." She nodded. "Writer. Thought so. You've got the look." I wasn't sure what that meant, but I smiled anyway. The locals watched me with something between suspicion and amusement. I tried to strike up conversation, but they responded in short answers and long silences. Only the bartender, whose name turned out to be Ruth, engaged much. She told me the town was called Tregowin, that her family had run the pub for 3 generations, and that not much ever happened there. Until it does. I asked her what she meant, but she just smirked and wiped down the bar. I was about to leave when one of the regulars, tall, thin, with hands like old rope, leaned over and said, "You should stay for the lock-in." I blinked. "Sorry, lock-in," Ruth repeated. "Bit of a tradition now and then. After hours, no tourists, just us. You'd be welcome. Consider it a proper Cornish welcome." I hesitated. I hadn't made any plans, and the night outside looked grim. The idea of being part of something local, even for one night, was oddly appealing. So I nodded. They locked the doors, drew the curtains, turned off the outside lights. The rest of the world disappeared. There were 7 of us in total. Ruth poured a round of something clear and sharp, homemade, judging by the bottle. The talk turned looser, stranger. They told stories about the sea. Not just shipwrecks and storms, but people going missing. "The sea takes what it's owed," one man said, dead serious. They all nodded like it was a fact of life. One by one, they told tales. A girl who'd vanished from her bedroom, her footprints ending at the cliff's edge. A fisherman who came back speaking a language no one could understand. A diver whose body washed up perfectly preserved, eyes open, mouth full of seawater. Every time I laughed or asked questions, they fell quiet. "It's not a joke," Ruth said eventually. "Not to us." After the second round, I began to feel heavy. Not drunk. I knew what drunk felt like, but detached. Like my limbs didn't belong to me. My vision narrowed, the room tilting slightly, the fire pulsing too brightly. "I just need the toilet," I mumbled. Ruth pointed wordlessly toward the hallway. I never made it. I remember reaching the end of the hallway. Then the world went sideways. Everything bled into darkness. I woke in cold silence. Stone beneath me, damp walls. My wrists ached, bound with what felt like twine. There was no light, save a dim glow filtering from a grate near the ceiling. I tried to scream, but my mouth was dry, tongue swollen. Panic rose fast and sharp, a spike of pure animal fear. My limbs were numb, like I'd been lying there for hours. Then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate. A door creaked open. Ruth entered, holding a torch. Her face was unreadable, hollowed by the shadows. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. "You weren't chosen. You came uninvited. But we make do." Behind her, others appeared. The tall man, The one with the ropey hands. All of them silent, watching. "We have a duty," she said, kneeling beside me. "To the tide, to the rhythm. Every year it takes someone. If not one of ours, then one of yours." She reached into a satchel and pulled out a knife. Small, rusted, not ceremonial, just old and used. Terror gripped me. I began thrashing, trying to scream, anything. But my body betrayed me. I was still too weak. "We never take locals," she whispered. "It's always the ones who come and think they're just visiting, just passing through." I heard movement from the far side of the room. A new voice.
Gran.
Everything froze. It was a girl no older than 12. Pale, barefoot, standing at the top of the cellar stairs. Her voice carried an odd, clipped accent, like someone imitating a local they'd only heard once. "I told you not to come down here," Ruth hissed. The girl stepped forward, holding a phone. "I called the police." "No, you didn't." The girl smiled. "I did. They're coming." Ruth stood. The others exchanged glances. I saw fear for the first time. Real fear. Then noise. Sirens in the distance. Barking. Flashlights. When I came to again, I was in the back of an ambulance. The police had found me in the pub's cellar. Drugged, dehydrated, bound. They arrested Ruth and 4 others on charges ranging from attempted murder to unlawful imprisonment. The knife had my blood on it, though I had no memory of being cut. But here's where it gets strange. There was no girl. No one saw her. No one could find her. The phone she supposedly used to call the police didn't exist. The call came from an anonymous tip. No name, no number. Just a voice, flat and clipped, saying, "There's a man in the cellar of the King's Shilling. They're going to kill him." Even stranger, the villagers denied everything. Said Ruth had gone senile, that she'd acted alone. But her diary told a different story. Pages of ritual notes. Names, dates, offerings. Most chilling were the clippings found hidden beneath the bar. Visitors gone missing. One every few years. Always outsiders. Always around October. No bodies ever found. It's been 2 weeks now. I've tried to forget. I've moved back to London. Seen a therapist. Avoided the sea. But this morning, I received a parcel. No return address. Inside was a photo. Black and white. Old. It showed a group of villagers standing outside the King's Shilling in the 1960s. Ruth was there, much younger. So were the others. And in the corner, half in shadow, stood the same girl who'd saved me. Same age. Same face. Same blank expression. I turned the photo over. One sentence was scrawled on the back in neat, looping handwriting. "The sea remembers what it's owed." It's as the title says, if you have bought or made a love potion, throw it away. Now, and if you still haven't, let me explain why you should. I used to have what I considered to be the perfect life. A tight-knit community of friends, a loving wife, a well-paying job as a pediatrician, and a warm and supportive family. My wife and I were planning to have children, wondering whether we should adopt or if one of us should carry the pregnancy. And my parents were excited at the prospect of grandchildren. And then one day, it all abruptly went to shit. The day started normal enough, did a few consultations without any trouble. But then, I gave a lollipop to a very brave little girl after her vaccine shot. And as her tiny fingers grabbed the stick, her fingertips brushed against my hand and sent white-hot pain through my whole arm. Taken aback, I quickly snatched away my hand, big eyes peering at me curiously. I played it off as static shock, but it kept happening. Coming back from work later that day, I leaned in to kiss my wife. The second our lips made contact, I reared back in pain. Kissing her felt like putting my mouth on hot iron. Seeing me in pain, panic seized her and she tried touching my arm in a comforting gesture. But again, the contact of her skin against mine sent a jolt of pain so violent I took several steps away from her. "See," call an ambulance. At the ER, the doctors were pretty much the same. If they wore gloves and only touched me for a short time, it was fine, like taking out a tray of baked goods with oven mitts on. The second naked skin made contact, however, the pain was unbearable. Their first thought was an allergic reaction. They asked me what I'd done or eaten that day, but I hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. I'd put on the same cologne, eaten the same lovingly cooked breakfast, drunk the same coffee at the same coffee shop, eaten the same sandwich from the same bakery, as it could be a matter of repeated exposure to the allergen the doctor prescribed some blood work. I anxiously waited for the results. That first night in bed with my wife was hell. Force of habit kept making us touch by accident. A playful and reassuring foot on my shin felt like having the skin of my leg peeled off. An attempt at hugging her ended with me jumping clear of the bed, wailing, her fingers brushing my face as she turned in her sleep. A white-hot iron poker dragged across my eyes. I ended up sleeping on the couch. The blood work came clean. A neurological issue was the doctor's next guess. They made me do an MRI. To no avail. Something in the staff's eyes turned off then. A light, I later learned, was their desire to help, extinguishing itself with a speed that meant it had never been very strong to begin with. It was obvious that they no longer believed me, that they thought my pain was psychological, somatic, and therefore, in their mind, no longer real. They weren't the only ones. Over the course of the following months, my wife's support waned until it turned into resentment. She took the fact that I couldn't touch anyone as a sign that I didn't want to touch her, that it was somehow a repressed homophobic part of me that was balking at the idea of starting a family together and manifested it that way, which was ridiculous. I hadn't dated men since high school, 15 years ago. I hadn't even had feelings for one beyond friendship. The first and only man I had fallen for had become my first girlfriend. My wife knew all that. It had even become an inside joke about how effective my gaydar was. It did nothing to appease her doubts. Sometimes, it made me want to scream at her, to yell, "What about in sickness and in health, huh?" But other times, I understood. What if she was right? And even if she wasn't, didn't she have the right to be angry? What if we had a child and I couldn't even hold it? Little by little, everyone around me left or I cut them off. My wife was the first to go, of course. I knew she had been cheating on me for a few weeks by the time I offered we divorced, leaving her hurt, but the look of relief on her face when I offered we end things hurt even more. I went back to my parents' house, looking for comfort, but even there I quickly felt unwelcome. My family had always been very tactile. My parents' attempt at comfort almost always involving a hug, a pat, or a comforting hand on my arm, all of which I kept evading. I tried meeting with my friends, but it always made me incredibly anxious. In summer, the heat made it hard to cover enough to avoid touch. In winter, it was easier, but even then, overheated interiors were hell. Worse than the pain was the constant fear of it, of a store clerk's fingertips brushing my palm when handing me back my change, of a stranger bumping into me, of a friend absent-mindedly leaning in to kiss my cheek. All those casual brushes of skin I had never thought about before that now brought pure agony. I felt like there was never enough layers of protection between myself and the searing pain other humans could inflict me. Unsurprisingly, my work too suffered from my new condition and subsequent paranoia. It was a bad look for a doctor to treat all of their patients like they were highly contagious. Always wearing gloves, keeping touches to the strict minimum. I tried to compensate by being very friendly, but it was like both children and parents could feel something was off. The kids got restless. The parents started to suspect I had some sort of problem. Add word of mouth into the mix and the number of patients coming to my office declined steadily. You would think eventually I'd build some pain tolerance. But if anything, it got worse. The oven mitts getting slimmer and slimmer. Soon I couldn't take the subway during rush hour, even clothed from head to toe, and could only go out when there were less people in the streets. I had to ask a colleague to put me on sick leave because I couldn't do consultations anymore. a year after the symptoms had first appeared, and I was at rock bottom. That's when I met Frank. I was at a cafe. So tired and miserable, I didn't look where I was going and bumped into him. I braced myself for misery, tensing every muscle, but nothing happened. Completely taken aback, I held the hand he offered me to get up, without thinking. I was already regretting my choice when our palms closed against one another, but then, nothing. No pain. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, but I just stayed there frozen, gaping at him, hand tightened around his, feeling the touch of another human being for the first time in a year. I had never realized how real of a phenomenon touch starvation was. Of course, as a physician, I knew it was a thing, but it was different to experience it myself. As horrible as the deprivation had been, the euphoria of being able to touch someone again was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. The rush of endorphins was such a high I almost swooned like a cartoon character. Coupled with our accidental bumping into, it seemed like a scene straight out of a romantic comedy. Love at first sight. Cue the violins and the platitudes about time stopping. "Are you okay?" Frank repeated. "Yes, I think you might be my soulmate" was not something I could just spring on the man. So having completely forgotten everything I'd painstakingly memorized in my teenage years about how to act around boys, I blurted, "I'm Nadia. Can I have your number?" Thankfully, that only made him laugh and blush a little, which was cute. He probably thought he was living something completely unreal. "You and me both, buddy." When I went back home, I realized just how ridiculous I'd been. What if this had all been a coincidence? What if I was just cured? I went to hug my mother that night. For the first time in a year, felt like being burned alive. After a good, long cry alone in the bathroom, I came to terms with the reality of the situation. It really was something about Frank, and only him. Unsurprisingly, we quickly started dating after that, which led to a lot of soul searching. I'm 33 and had been identifying as a lesbian for the last 13 years, so it was a massive shock to fall for a man. It made me queasy to think my ex-wife might have been right, that it might have been my subconscious trying to tell me life with her wasn't what I really wanted. Even if it had seemed so real, dating Frank was fine. For the most part, touching another human was a luxury I had clearly taken for granted. Every time we held hands or hugged was incredible after months without it. More intimate gestures were more complicated. Kissing was still mostly okay, but as much as I had missed the touch of another human, anything beyond that made me really uncomfortable. I tried a couple of times to psych myself up when we were kissing and his touches turned more pointed, but I just didn't feel any of the desire I'd felt for my ex-wife or girlfriends over the years. And I wasn't a teenager anymore. I knew what desire felt like for me, and I knew that I didn't feel it for Frank. But he was also the only human whose touch wasn't physically painful. At least Frank wasn't pushy. Of course, he was a bit bummed that intimacy between us was going at a snail pace, but he was content to wait. I had told him that I had a condition that made touch difficult, and he was very understanding. "I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for as long as it takes," he told me. At the time, I was relieved and grateful to finally have someone in my life who was willing to give me the grace no one had given me in over a year. Now, however, I realized his words had a very different meaning. Personality-wise, Frank reminded me of some of my high school boyfriends before I'd realized I wasn't attracted to them. He was gentle, shy, not very manly. Actually, for some reason, he reminded me a little of my last boyfriend, who had, incidentally, turned to be my first girlfriend. Unlike her, though, Frank was very much a straight, cisgender man, and he would stay that way until he died. It sometimes led to friction. After dating women for so long, there were expectations I wasn't used to anymore. Not that dating women doesn't come with its own problems. Relationships are hard. At first, it was fun to get the princess treatment, not paying at restaurants or having him open doors for me. It was novel. It stopped being cute when he told me I shouldn't wear heels because it made me look taller than him. or that he was uncomfortable that I earned so much money as a doctor. He also seemed really upset by the fact that I had had a life before him, sentimental and sexual. But we always managed to iron things out. While this was happening, I kept thinking a lot about my first girlfriend, Aurora, and how different our relationship had been from the get-go, even when she'd still looked like a man. We'd broken up ages ago, but for some reason she kept popping up in my mind. After a bit, I realized I might have missed her. She wasn't the only one. Beyond the isolation that had come from my debilitating fear of touch, being a lesbian had been such an integral part of my identity for so long. I felt deeply uncomfortable reconnecting with my friends now. I didn't feel like I belonged to the bars, cafes, or club I'd gone to. Didn't want to talk to the friends who's been at our wedding with my ex. I was all the more uncomfortable that I'd let a lot of biphobia fly from said friends over the years, and was now terrified of reaping what I'd sown. And then, one day, everything came crashing down. I was getting bubble tea at a little shop near my house when I heard a voice call behind me. Nadia, and there she was, Aurora. She was a vision, radiant, like her name. She looked exactly as I remembered her, and yet nothing like it. The numbers of piercings on her ears and face had doubled, and new tattoos had bloomed on her arms, some covering older, less well-made ones. Her style had gone from chaotic young goth to sophisticated older goth, and it suited her perfectly. "Aurora," I whispered, "I can't believe it's you. It's been ages. How have you been?" I could have just said everything was fine, but it wasn't. Not really. And so, actually, this last year's been really weird. Aurora had always been into weird stuff. Astrology, the occult, witchcraft, that kind of things. That was one of the things that had contributed to our breakup. I used to be a bit of an asshole in uni, not really understanding the role belief played in people's lives, and how someone could believe in that crap while planning to work in healthcare. She, in turn, didn't understand why I was so strongly against something she viewed as harmless. We'd both learned since then. Aurora had certainly learned the hard way some beliefs are anything but harmless. I told her everything, and I mean everything. How I hadn't been able to touch people in over a year, how weird it felt that the only person I could touch was a man, and how strange it was to be in a straight relationship again. I was expecting Aurora to be surprised by my story and to reassure me on my sexual orientation. She was bi after all. What I did not expect was for her to look at me with a quietly horrified expression, the same kind I'd used a decade ago, when she'd offhandedly mentioned something her family had done that she hadn't realized was abusive yet. "Nadia, what you're describing, it sounds a lot like a love potion." "What?" I laughed, but she wasn't joking. "Well, some people call it a love potion, but it's a euphemism, really. It doesn't make you love the person who used it. It just makes you dependent of them. Aren't you a little old to believe in that stuff?" I deal with that stuff for a living. Started as a side hustle, became quite profitable. Not here nor there. So what? I'm telling you about my very real problems, and you just see an opportunity to sell me some woo-woo shit? Are you planning to rope me into an MLM scheme next? Nadia, you had everything you wanted in life. Are you telling me that without that freak disease coming seemingly out of nowhere, you would have dropped your tight community, gorgeous and loving wife, and high-paying job for some random guy named Frank who's insecure about his height? Fuck. Aurora was right. This wasn't like me. Man or not, I had never been the type to fall in love with a stranger. And even if my preferences had suddenly changed, I had plenty of male friends and acquaintances who were way more my type than Frank would ever be. But why? How? I couldn't imagine why anyone would use a love potion on me, especially a man. There were thousands, if not millions, of women way more conventionally attractive than I'd ever be. Also, how had Frank even managed it? Didn't a potion need to be drunk in some way? How had a stranger managed to poison me? "Listen, I need to get back to my day job," Aurora said, "but give me your phone number and we'll get to the bottom of this." I took out my phone, the background picture a photo of Frank, and that was now starting to feel more unsettling than cute. My uneasiness was nothing compared to Aurora's reaction. Her face blanched when she saw it. Nadia, that's Francis Junit. That couldn't be. I knew Francis Junit. He'd been one of Aurora's friends pre-transition. He'd had a crush on me and had been incredibly obnoxious about it. Creepy, even. Aurora hadn't liked his behavior at the time. Even more so when her group of friends had started acting like it was fine. Just boys being boys. She'd completely cut ties with them after that, investing in her other friendships and our relationship, which had eventually helped her figure out who she was. What? There's no way. I would have recognized him. Would you? After that first incident, I made sure you wouldn't cross paths. Fuck. That was probably why I'd been thinking about Aurora so much in the last few months. She was the link between me and that creep I'd thought to be a stranger. I had kissed Francis Junit. I had very nearly had sex with Francis fucking Junit. I was gonna be sick. Can I make it stop? Aurora's expression became very somber and my stomach dropped. Yes, but it's not easy. I left the bubble tea shop, absent-mindedly running my hand through the new piece of jewelry around my neck in a self-soothing motion, and immediately called Frank. I demanded that we meet that night. He must have misread my tone, mistaking my nervousness for eagerness, because when I came to his Haussmannian apartment, everything was suspiciously clean and tidy. Even the gigantic mirror embedded in the wall was spotless. I could imagine why he'd cleaned it. I didn't let him kiss me or get near me. His touch might have not hurt, but it did not bring any comfort anymore. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Frank, I know about the love potion. The love? He stared at me with wide eyes. I think his surprise was genuine, because the question he asked next definitely wasn't, "Babe, what are you talking about? Please, don't play dumb with me. I know you're the reason why I can't touch other people." "Oh, because you want to touch other people?" he said with a derisive tone and an ugly expression of dismissal. Despite not being attracted to him in that way, I had never found him ugly until that very moment. "Francis, I haven't been able to hug my parents in over a year because of you." The name gave him a pause. "So you remember me?" "Now I do, yeah. You've changed a lot, and I only saw you once or twice then." He'd sent me SMS for months, stalked me on Facebook, tried to get in contact with me through common acquaintances. But Aurora had shielded me from the worst of it, so I'd barely seen his face. Would it have changed anything if I had recognized him earlier? His brow pinched, his eyes watered. It was unsettling. What right did he have to cry? I've always loved you, Nadia. Always. But it was like you didn't even see me back then. You only had eyes for Nicholas. I shuddered when I heard the disgust in his voice, but did not correct him. I did not want him to know anything about Aurora's life now that he was out of it. And then I saw you again at the cafe I had just started working at, and it was like fate. He continued, oblivious to my discomfort. I knew I couldn't let you go again. That was 10 years ago, Francis. So, what's a decade in the face of true love? This isn't true love, I yelled, appalled. Of course it is. Now you finally need me like I need you. But I don't need you. Not really. I don't even love you. I just don't have a choice. You say that now, but if we spend more time together, then I'll just resent you more. Now I was the one crying, please, let me go. Move on. There is a way to do that. I know about the fucking ritual. I'm not doing it, he said, cutting me. The tears were still there, on his cheeks, glittering in the low light. But his voice and face were hard, cruel, determined. Now that he finally had what he wanted, he wasn't going to let go. The ritual to get rid of the effects of the potion was a week long. It required both the user and the recipient's willing involvement. And Francis would, indeed, never do it. I could see it clear as day. He might pretend he would, if I begged or screamed or cried enough, if I left long enough. But ultimately he would bargain, would postpone, would blame. He already was. And how long until my own energy and patience ran out? How long until I was too exhausted to leave? I see, I said quietly. I took hold of the pendant Aurora had given me, my fist shaking as I held it in a tight grip. I took one long look at the man who had taken nearly everything from me, the man who had poisoned and isolated me, just so that I would look his way. And with all the hatred I felt for him, I pulled the pendant quickly, as hard as I could. The band of the necklace went taut, then snapped, the metal clasp breaking more easily than it ought to. I don't know what I expected to happen. Aurora had been purposefully vague about what the results would be. The old and massive mirror behind Frank started rippling. I frowned, unsure what I was seeing. It was so dark. Had it been this dark earlier? All of a sudden, a gigantic hand came out of the reflecting surface. It closed around Frank's entire body, cutting his breath. I heard bones break. Not a drop of the blood that poured from his mouth made it to the ground as the hand behind the mirror retreated. It's been 2 months since then. Frank has been reported missing. Wherever his body is, I don't think the police will find it. I've resumed work and patients are slowly trickling in again. I could leave my parents' house, but I think I'll stay a little longer. It feels too good to get to hug them in the morning. I've also reconnected with my friends, giving them an edited version of what happened, one that involves drugs and an abusive relationship but no love potion. I'm unbelievably grateful for their hugs of comfort. Maybe in a few months I'll contact my ex-wife again, explain what happened. I don't want her to feel guilty, but I think she deserves to know. Might save her a few hours of therapy, or add to it. Aurora and I are also meeting regularly. I don't know if it will turn into anything. For now, we're taking it easy. So yeah, if you have acquired a love potion, I strongly advise you to reconsider using it, because there are in fact 2 ways to reverse its effects. One is a week-long ritual for which both parties need to consent. They need to want, from the bottoms of their hearts, to get rid of the effects of the thing. The other, way faster and easier process is to kill the person who used the potion. And now that my story is out there, your target has way more chances of knowing what the effects of a love potion are and how to make them stop. You have been warned. It happened again last night. I saw the film, the one that only plays when I'm asleep. This was the 3rd time this week. I wish I could tell you it was just another weird dream, some fleeting nonsense my tired brain conjured up. But every time I wake up after watching it, something in my real life is different, and not in a small way either. At first I thought I was losing my mind, misremembering things. Now I'm certain it's the film that's changing everything around me, piece by piece. The first time I dreamed of the film, I didn't realize what I'd seen. I woke up with only hazy images in my mind. A dimly lit, mostly empty movie theater, dust dancing in the projector beam that cut through the darkness. A musical score playing faintly, something classical, almost a lullaby, and a feeling of quiet dread hanging in the air like a fog. I brushed it off as an ordinary dream, albeit a vivid one. That morning, I was groggy, but nothing felt out of place. At least not until I left my apartment and noticed the old willow tree outside was gone. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at the patch of dirt where the willow had been. It was a mature tree easily 40 feet tall, one that had stood outside the building for as long as I could remember. Now there was just raw earth and a few stray roots poking up like exposed nerves. I even pressed my hand to the kitchen window, half expecting to feel the familiar rough trunk through the glass. Nothing. The tree had vanished without a trace overnight. My first thought was that the city must have come with a crew at dawn, removed the tree due to disease or old age. It was early, the sun barely up, and maybe I had just slept through chainsaws and machinery somehow. I asked my neighbor about it later that day, but she looked at me like I was crazy. "What tree?" she replied. "The huge willow right outside," I insisted. She pursed her lips and told me she'd lived in this building 5 years, and there had never been a willow tree there. I laughed it off, confused. Maybe I had dreamed the tree, too, Or maybe she was messing with me. I even Googled old street photos, only to find images with no willow in front of the building at all. It made no sense. I knew that tree. I'd stood under its shade last summer. The second time it happened, I started to suspect something strange was going on. 2 nights after the willow vanished, I had another dream of the film. I remember more of it this time. I was not just an observer in a theater, I was in the film, or at least it felt that way. I was a kid, riding my old red bicycle down the hill on Mulberry Street where I grew up. In the dream, a dog darted out and I swerved. I felt the impact, the ground tearing into my skin. It was so visceral I jolted awake in a cold sweat, heart hammering in my chest. My sheets were damp and twisted from my restless sleep. Still shaky, I swung my legs out of bed and hissed in pain. A sharp, burning throb radiated from my right knee. Confused, I rolled up my pajama pant leg. There was a fresh scab stretching across my kneecap, raw and angry red, as if I'd wiped out on pavement. I stared at it, uncomprehending. I hadn't hurt myself, not recently, but it looked exactly like the kind of scab a kid gets from a bad bike fall. I hobbled to the bathroom and flipped on the light. In the mirror, I could see it better. A large scrape with bits of grit still embedded. Dried blood streaked down my shin. My stomach turned at the sight. How could this injury be real? I touched it gingerly and winced. It was real, all right. I spent the next hour disinfecting it, my mind whirling. That morning I called my mom, half laughing, half nervous, to ask if I'd ever crashed my bike on Mulberry Street as a kid. There was a pause on the line. Then she chuckled. "Of course you did, honey. You still have the scar, don't you? You were so brave. You got right back on that bike after the ER stitched you up." I felt cold all over as I hung up. I have no scar on my knee, at least I never did before. But sure enough, after cleaning the wound, I found the faint silvery line of an old scar under the fresh scrapes. A scar that had not been there yesterday. Memories I never had began to trickle in. The smell of the hospital, the itch of the stitches, a phantom ache when it rained. They felt real, but I knew they were new, like someone had edited my life and inserted this scene. I spent the rest of that day double-checking my own memories against reality. I dug out an old photo album, hands trembling as I flipped through pages. Sure enough, there was a picture of 10-year-old me with a bandaged knee, grinning gap-toothed at the camera while my mother held up my crutches. The photo had never been in my album before, I was certain. Yet there it was, physical proof of a childhood accident I never lived through until last night. I felt like I'd gone crazy, but the scab on my knee still stung, grounding me in the present. I had to accept that somehow the dream had reached out and altered the facts of my life. I wanted to tell someone, my best friend, Mark, or maybe my girlfriend, Elena. But how could I explain any of this without sounding insane? "Hey, do you remember that giant willow tree outside my place? No? Well, it was there yesterday." Or, "Did you know I apparently almost lost my leg in 4th grade and just forgot about it for 20 years? It was futile. Instead, I feigned a stomach bug and took the day off work. I spent hours pacing my apartment, chain-drinking black coffee to stay alert. I was terrified of what would happen if I fell asleep again. By nightfall, my nerves were shot. I hadn't slept properly in over 24 hours. Every time I blinked, I saw afterimages, perhaps from exhaustion, perhaps something else. Once, as I splashed cold water on my face, I swore I saw a flash of light on the bathroom wall behind me, as if a projector had come to life for a split second. There was no source, of course, just my phone's flashlight reflecting weirdly, or my imagination. The shadows under my eyes looked like bruises. My head ached. Still, I refused to lie down. I would not dream, I told myself. If I didn't dream, nothing would change. But eventually, sometime around 3 a.m., I hit the wall. My body betrayed me. I remember sitting on the couch, the TV droning infomercials at low volume while I browsed forums for anything about dreams changing reality. My eyes were so heavy. I blinked and suddenly the TV wasn't on anymore. My apartment was dark. The clock read 4:47 a.m. I had lost nearly 2 hours. A surge of panic brought me fully awake. I checked my phone's camera roll, my messages, the front door lock, trying to see if I had sleepwalked or done anything in that missing time. Everything was as I left it. Everything except for the fact that I had apparently fallen asleep sitting upright. And I had dreamed. My heart was pounding. I tried to recall what I'd seen in the dream, but it slipped away like smoke. Only an uneasy feeling remained, a dread that something important had just happened on that screen. I needed to check on things. The apartment looked the same at first glance. The willow was still gone, my knee still bandaged, but something new was off. I could feel it in my bones, a wrongness in the atmosphere. Dawn light was creeping in, so I threw on a jacket and decided to go see Mark. I needed to see a familiar face to ground myself. Mark lived 2 floors down. We hung out almost every other day, playing video games, grabbing beers, complaining about work. He was my one constant through all of this. I knocked on his door, softly at first, then harder. No answer. Odd, he was an early riser. After the 3rd knock, the door across the hall cracked open. Old Mrs. Gomez peeked out, bleary-eyed. "Who are you looking for, dear?" she asked. Mark Tillman. Did he go out?" I replied. She furrowed her gray brows. "Nobody by that name lives on this floor. It's just been me and the Nguyen family for years." She must have noticed the color drain from my face because she added hastily, "Maybe your friend moved out?" "Moved out, right?" I mumbled, stumbling back. I knew Mark hadn't moved. We were literally playing Fortnite together in his living room 2 nights ago. I fumbled for my phone and pulled up my contacts. Mark's entry was gone. My text history with him gone. Photos? I scrolled frantically through my camera roll. Every selfie, every group shot from parties and hikes, Mark was missing. In some, he was just not there at all, leaving a conspicuous gap. In others, a different acquaintance filled the spot. One of my co-workers, looking awkward in what should have been Mark's place. A cold wave of nausea hit me. Mark Tillman had been erased from my life. I don't remember stumbling back to my apartment, but suddenly I was there, slamming the door behind me and sliding down to the floor. I tried Elena next. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Her number was still in my contacts. Thank God. It rang and rang. Just before it went to voicemail, she picked up. "Hello." Her voice was groggy. It was 6 a.m. after all.
Elena.
I gasped in relief. "Oh my God. Something's wrong. Mark is..." She cut me off, confused. "Who?" "Mark, my best friend." There was a pause. "Babe, you haven't mentioned a Mark in the year I've known you. Are you sure you're okay?" she asked quietly. "Maybe you should get some rest, you sound..." She trailed off. Couldn't even respond. I just thanked her for picking up and hung up abruptly, my head spinning. A year? Elena and I had been together 3 years, not 1. But now that I thought about it, flashes of a new memory rose to the surface. Meeting Elena at a Christmas party last year and hitting it off, when originally we'd met in college ages ago. The history of our relationship had changed, just like everything else. Mark was gone, and in the void he left, my timeline shifted enough that even my relationship's origin was different. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by photo albums filled with holes and lies, trying not to lose my grip on reality entirely. My eyes fell on the scattered pages of notes I'd written last night, the ones meant to document the original reality. They were still there on the coffee table, covered in my frantic handwriting. Proof that it all really happened. At least I remembered how things used to be. I clung to that for a moment, picking up a page at random and reading my own words. Mark Tillman, friend since college, now gone. A bitter laugh escaped me. It felt like reading a eulogy for a person no one but me remembered. At some point, adrenaline and terror gave way to a hollow numbness. I knew I couldn't keep doing this alone. If I didn't find answers, I'd lose myself. So I broke my rule and did the one thing you should never do when you're questioning your sanity. I went online. Most results were useless, new age blogs about lucid dreaming or schizophrenic gibberish. But on a dusty corner of the internet, I found a thread in a paranormal forum from 2008. A user named FilmBuff99 had posted, "Every night I watch a movie in my dreams. I think it's changing things when I'm awake. No one believes me. Has this happened to anyone else?" There were only a few replies. The others mostly told him to seek therapy or joked that he was on drugs. The original poster never responded again after that initial post. I stared at that screen until the words blurred. It was like reading my own thoughts. Had FilmBuff99 succumbed to the same thing? Did he vanish or lose his mind or worse? The thread was over a decade old. I'd never find out what happened to that person. I shut my laptop when I realized my hands were trembling uncontrollably. I needed help. Professional help, maybe. If reality was unraveling, could a psychiatrist even do anything? Doubtful, but maybe they could at least drug me dreamless. It was a slim hope, but better than nothing. Morning edged toward afternoon as I weighed my options. Finally, I caved and phoned a psychiatrist I used to see years ago for anxiety. I was lucky he picked up at all on a Saturday. I didn't go into detail, just blabbered that I hadn't slept and was seeing things and needed help. My voice must have scared him because he agreed to squeeze me in over lunch. Dr. Simon's office was cool and bright, all reassuring beige tones and soft music. I sat on the leather couch twisting my hands while he peered at me over his glasses. I couldn't tell him the full truth, or I'd be locked up for sure. So I rambled about intense nightmares, stress at work, maybe a pending psychotic break. It wasn't far from the truth, really. He listened patiently. In the end, he scribbled something on his prescription pad. "I'm going to give you something to help you rest," he said slowly, as if talking to a spooked animal. "Just a mild sedative. Take it tonight, you'll get some sleep. We can regroup Monday and talk more then." I nodded numbly and took the slip of paper. I was both relieved and horrified. Relieved that he didn't throw me into a padded cell on the spot. Horrified because he was essentially telling me to do the one thing I feared most. Sleep. I stumbled out of his office with the prescription and a pamphlet on sleep hygiene, feeling like I'd signed my own death warrant. I didn't fill it right away. Instead, I wandered the city in a daze as evening fell, dreading going home to another night. I found myself standing at one point in front of an old cinema downtown, its marquee blank and dusty as if no film had shown there in years. The sight made me shiver. I hurried on, pulling my jacket tight against a chill that wasn't just the autumn air. All around me, people were wrapping up their normal days, hailing cabs, walking dogs, grabbing dinner. To them, it was just a Saturday like any other. To me, it felt like the last day before the end of the world, and only I knew it. Back at my apartment, I scribbled down everything I could remember about the original versions of my life. Details about Mark, about the willow tree, the accident I never had. I was terrified those memories might fade or warp if I lost any more time. The act of writing steadied me a little. It was something concrete, proof that at least I remembered how things used to be. Around 9 p.m., as I sat clutching the pill bottle with shaking hands, there was a knock at my door. I nearly jumped out of my skin. For a second, my brain conjured the image of some shadowy film character come to take me away. But it was Elena, thank God. I opened the door and she stepped in, eyes full of worry. She said I hadn't sounded like myself on the phone. I must have looked a wreck because she immediately pulled me into a hug. "You're freezing," she murmured, feeling my forehead. I realized I was shivering. I wanted so badly to unload everything on her, to make her understand. But seeing her standing there in my living room, concerned and very real, I couldn't bring myself to drag her into my nightmare. I just muttered that I hadn't slept and that I'd had a panic attack. She glanced at the pages of frenzied notes I'd left on the coffee table. "Is this why you were asking about your friend earlier?" she asked gently. I guess, I don't know, I said. She gave me a long, searching look, then picked up the pill bottle from my hand. Why haven't you taken these? I'm scared, I admitted in a whisper. My eyes burned with exhausted tears I was too proud to shed.
Elena's face softened.
Hey, it's okay. You're not going to feel better until you sleep. She tapped 2 pills out, not just one. Take these. I'll stay the night, watch some boring TV next to you. If you get any nightmares, I'll wake you. Okay? I wanted to protest that she couldn't possibly wake me from this, but I had no fight left. Maybe it was the faint scent of her perfume or the steadiness of her voice, but I nodded. I swallowed the pills. She helped me to bed like I was an invalid. The sedatives pulled me under in no time. Despite Elena's presence beside me, I felt myself slipping into the familiar darkness of that dream world. This time, I found myself back in the old movie theater, the one from the very first dream. I was seated in the front row now, and the screen loomed huge and bright before me. There were no other patrons, no sound but the whir of the projector somewhere behind me. My body felt leaden. I couldn't move from the seat. On the screen, scenes from my life flickered. I saw myself as a boy blowing out birthday candles. Only I was alone, no family around the table. Cut to teenage me, sitting in an empty classroom, desks vacant. A jump cut. I was older, standing in an aisle of blooming willow trees, row after row of them lining a street I didn't recognize. The film jumped again, and I was watching a new scene. Elena walking past me on a city sidewalk as if I were a stranger, her eyes sliding over me with no recognition. No, I tried to shout, but in the theater only a strained whisper escaped my lips. I struggled to move, to get out of that damn seat and stop this, but it was like being pinned by invisible weights. The projector light above me burned intensely. The scenes kept changing, faster now. I saw my mother younger, crying in a hospital waiting room. No, not crying, just sitting quietly as a doctor shook her hand. Through some impossible perspective, I saw into the doctor's clipboard. A birth certificate with my name, and the word stillborn stamped in stark black letters. I started sobbing, a raw animal sound. The film was wiping me out entirely, undoing my very birth. Image after image blazed by. An empty nursery with pale yellow walls, a little league team photo with one boy missing in the lineup, a high school graduation with an unfilled chair on stage. Then came adult life. Office group pictures with a gap where I should be, holiday gatherings where my mom and dad posed as a childless couple. Each scene was a world where I wasn't there, as if I'd been meticulously cut out of every frame of reality. At last, the film sputtered. The screen went white with the final blinding flare of a projector reaching the end of its reel. In the sudden silence, I realized I could stand. I got up on shaky legs and turned around, desperate to confront the source of all this. Up in the projection booth window, I saw a shape, a human silhouette. My heart leapt into my throat. "Why are you doing this?" I screamed, my voice echoing in the empty theater. The silhouette did not answer. It just cocked its head, as if studying me. Then it raised a hand in a small wave and switched off the projector. Everything went dark. I awoke to morning light and the sound of silence. The apartment was empty. Elena was gone. No imprint on the pillow, no note, nothing. For one blissful second, I thought maybe she'd just stepped out for coffee. Then I noticed her overnight bag wasn't there. Neither were the empty pill packets that had been on my nightstand. It was like she had never come at all. Dread coiled in my stomach as I got up and searched the apartment. Her presence had been wiped clean. Hands trembling, I grabbed my phone and called Elena's number. It rang, and my heart lifted when she answered. "Hello." Her voice was cautious, like she gets with unknown callers. "Elena," I breathed. "Thank God you left. I was worried." "Who is this?" She cut in. I stopped cold. It's me." Pause. "I'm sorry, you must have the wrong number." Her tone was polite, utterly unfamiliar. She hung up, leaving me listening to the dead line. I sank into the couch in a daze. I think I knew what I'd find next, but I had to confirm. With a kind of morbid calm, I dialed my mother's number. It went to voicemail, her cheerful voice asking callers to leave a message. I didn't leave one. What could I say? Instead, I tried my dad's old cell, the one he barely uses. He picked up on the third ring with a gruff, "Hello." For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. "Dad," I managed at last. "Who is this?" he replied. His tone held no recognition. "It's me. It's your son," I said, voice barely above a whisper. There was a long silence. "I'm sorry, you have the wrong number," he said, awkwardly, like he wasn't sure. My throat clenched. "Dad, please." I hated the pleading in my voice. The line stayed quiet for a long time. Then, softly, like he was speaking to someone else in the room, I heard him say, "Marianne, hang up. It's some nut job." Marianne, my mother's name. The call disconnected. They didn't know me. My own parents. Whether I had never been born or somehow their memories were stolen, it hardly mattered. To them and to the rest of the world, I no longer exist. Only I remember the life I had, and even those memories are tenuous, like sand slipping through my fingers. I'm writing this down while I still can, in the hopes that maybe it will anchor me to reality, or that someone out there will read it and remember me, even when I'm gone. But I can feel it happening already. A numbness in my hands, a coldness creeping up through my bones, like I'm fading. I don't know what will happen when I finally fall asleep and there's no one left to wake up. The film ended. The credits rolled. I think this story is over now, except I'm still here, caught in the final frame, waiting for the projector bulb to burn out. Max was the one who got the idea. He wanted us to hike up the Salamanca mountain together to welcome Daniel and Mateo to town. Trekking up Salamanca is kind of a local tradition. Nowadays there's more to do in town, but a few years back, racing to the top of our little hills were most of what kids could do around here. It was either that or the beach, the stone beach with its unhealthy amount of broken glass, scrap metals and crack dealers that are also less present nowadays. Now, from all the hills we had, Salamanca was different. It's not that big, but it is the only one in town big enough to be actually considered a mountain. Well, it's actually a few kilometers out of town, but the point remains. For the children, reaching its peak, accompanied by an adult of course, meant being one of the cool kids. For example, I climbed it with my father and my uncle when I was 12. Never tried it again since then, but I remember bragging with the other kids and being the coolest girl for a few weeks, but eventually everyone climbed Salamanca. It seemed just fair that the new guys would have to experience that too, so I, and everyone else, accepted the invitation. Not everyone in the group could drive, so we had to arrange for some of us to pick up the others, in my case just one, Miguel. That morning I did just that, asked for my dad's car and drove right up to Miguel's house. He didn't answer my messages, so I had to get out of the car and knock. Maria, Miguel's mother, greeted me on the door. "Hi, Ami. How you doing, sweetie?" "Hi, Maria. Is Miguel awake? We had plans for today." "Yes, he's taking a bath. Come in, I made cookies." Miguel and I had known each other since kindergarten. In a way, his mother was my friend too. Anyway, after a few minutes of waiting, Miguel was finally eating/devouring his breakfast with us. "Why the hurry, dumbass? We're still early," I told him while he was attacking 2 cookies at once. "We still have to pick up cash," he responded with his mouth still full. "We what?" "His dad needs their car, so I told him we would get him." "You what?" "I don't want him in my car." "Well, don't pick him up then," he said without taking his eyes off the food. "I can't do that now, idiot." "Language," Maria interrupted from a different room. "Sorry." "Well, I guess we're late then. Grab your stuff, we're out." Goodbye, Maria. Loved the cookies. It took us around 10 minutes to get to Cash House. Time that I fully spent reminding Miguel that he doesn't get to invite misogynistic idiots into my car. When we reached the house, Cash's car was still right outside, meaning his father was still in there. I wanted to avoid any interaction with the bigger idiot, so I sent Cash a message and just waited on the car playing tongue twisters with Miguel. But after some minutes and the humiliation of Peter Piper Pete a Pet, he got tired of waiting without a response and got out of the car to knock on the door. Almost immediately after, Cash came out wearing sunglasses, shorts, and a tank top, carrying a thermos and an unnecessarily big backpack, saluted Miguel with a bear hug, and walked to the car screaming, "Hey, Omi. Thanks for the rescue, princess. You can go to the passenger seat now. I can still leave you here if you want," I replied, hoping he would take the offer. They got in the car laughing like idiots. "I'll save you the 20 minutes drive to Salamanca." Most of that was Cash making dick jokes anyway. When we reached the meeting place, there were 2 cars waiting already. "Why did you drive that crap here? You know you can ask me for a lift, Max," I joked off the window as I was entering the parking lot. Max's car was an old Fiat 147 his father bought him for his birthday. The thing runs on hopes, dreams, and no seatbelts. Not the car you should drive on a gravel road, or any road, honestly. "I prefer not being late, thanks," Max quickly answered, as if offended for the insult to his precious car. "You know that's not my fault," I replied. "Sup, beauties. Sorry for the waiting," Cash said as he got out of the still-moving car. He fisted pumped Lucas and Ramiro, then friendly punched Max in the shoulder as hard as he could, and all of that fast enough to get back to the car right as I stopped it just to open my door and make a reverence. "Oh, Lucas, save me from this gorillas, please," I cried before giving Lucas 2 cheek kisses and a hug. "Don't worry, girl, you're safe, no," Lucas responded compassionately. "You're the one who chooses to hang out with us, missus. Not like other girls," Ramiro, Lucas's boyfriend, said. "I don't like you," I joked. "So when are the newbies coming?" Cash asked. "They said they're on their way. Shouldn't take too much," Max answered. "Wanna play truco in the meantime? I have cards," Cash offered while searching on his backpack. "Sure. Miguel, you're on my team." Thankfully, Daniel and Mateo arrived before Cash. Lucas and I got obliterated 30-1 on our truco match. Those 2 had recently become friends with Ramiro and Max since they all played on the same soccer team, and the rest of us decided they were nice enough to be welcomed into the chat group a few weeks after they met. They parked their car next to mine and joined the group. The greetings were less chaotic since we were still on a try not to scare them off phase. Except for Cash, of course. He couldn't help being his regular loud self. "Finally, men, you can't just leave the ladies waiting like this. Ain't that right, Miguel?" he exclaimed in what I guess was meant to be a British accent. "Come here and show your cards already." Miguel replied, annoyed. Sorry. We lost the keys, but thanks for waiting for us. I'm really excited to do this." Mateo was usually shy and barely talked at all. Hearing him say that many words in a row was surprising. "Hey, Mateo, did you put on the sunscreen like I told you?" Daniel's words made a huge contrast with his heavy metal t-shirt, piercings, and tattoos, but he was always very protective of his little brother, so it wasn't very surprising to hear him speak like that. After some more chatting and making sure we had everything we needed, we finally started the trekking. The mountain was mostly filled with green and yellow dry bushes and quizes, cute small tailless rodents. To access it, you must first walk up the Sombrero Hill and then go down a little canyon. From there are 3 paths you can take: the easy path, the hard path, and Los Arenales, which is supposed to be taken only on the way down since the slippery sand makes it really hard to climb. I know that because my dad allowed me to choose a path the first time I climbed it, and that's the one I picked, not making that mistake again. All of my friends had climbed Salamanca too, and none of us used the easy path before, so this time we decided we were going to explore that one on the way up and go down through Los Arenales. The easy path was, as expected, easy. The views were still beautiful. The hills all around us were so green it felt as if they were covered by one single thick layer of grass and not the giant prickly bushes that we all knew were there. There were guanacos, llamas with shorter hair, running on the distance with such an elegance that felt mechanically impossible. One of them even got really close to us at some point. Sadly, it did not spit at Cash when he tried to touch it. The best, of course, was the peak. Someone had put 2 long metal bar with 2 bricks on the sides there to simulate a chair. I have no clue how they brought that 580 meters up, but I was not going to complain. So either way, I took a seat and enjoyed the cold breeze of pure air on the perfect position to watch the sea appear beyond the hills while the aguiluchos, tiny eagles, flew so close to us we could almost touch them. That was beautiful, that was peaceful. That was until Cash tried to hit one of the poor birds with a rock. "Hey, stop that jerk," I demanded. "I'm just having fun, Ami. I'm not actually gonna hit him. You are actively aiming, dumbass, and you could hit someone else. Oh, come on, just have fun for once. Why you're always like this? Just leave the birds alone, dude. Is not the big deal," Lucas said in my support. "I'm not aiming at them, Luke," Cash protested. "It's still dangerous muscle brain," Daniel pointed out. Cash immediately looked at Max and Ramiro searching for allies. "Yeah, I'm not arguing with the man," Ramiro responded to his glance as to walk out of the situation. "Just stop, bro, you might hit someone," Max cited. "Who? A ghost? There's no one here, guys," Cash exclaimed with his arms extended as to point out the lack of anything. At that point, Miguel appeared from behind me carrying a rock on his hands and suddenly throw it as far as he could. "Ah, mine got further," he laughed. "My turn," Mateo joyfully said, jumping from his seat. "Mateo," his brother yelled. "What? I won't aim at the birds. And he's right. There's no one here besides us. See, they get it. Hey, Miguel, I bet you can't reach the sea from here. But with a Real rock this time, that one was too tiny." Cash challenged Miguel, ignoring the whole previous discussion. "God, you're so insufferable," I wanted to say, but got immediately interrupted by Miguel. "I can reach your mother from here if I want to." At least he was having fun. "Hey, my car is in that direction. Don't throw that far,"
Max protested.
"It's not your car that worries me," Lucas joked. "Whatever, there's no way they are reaching it," Ramiro added. "I don't care, aim the other way,"
Max insisted in desperation.
"Heard that, boys? Mom gave us permission," Cash celebrated with a big dumb smile. "Oh, just let us enjoy the silence for a second," I cried in exhaustion. "Hey, Cash, I bet you can't reach even that spot with this rock," Mateo challenged. "Oh, you don't know me very well, huh?" he answered. It was a very big rock, and it seemed to be heavy too. I still don't know what the spot was supposed to be. I just ignored them and asked Max to share his earphones to listen to some relaxing music. At least they really weren't aiming at the birds this time. At least the scream that answer wasn't a bird. "Shit," Cash muttered as he got paled. "You absolute idiot." I erupted in anger, red as a volcano. "Who was that?" Daniel questioned before yelling to his brother. "Mateo, come back here. Aren't we all here?" Max asked to no one in particular. "That's not one of us," Miguel replied. "Oh God, you fucking kill someone," I continued to yell. "Fuck me. I'm sorry," Cash cried regretfully. "Calm down, they might be fine." Lucas attempted to cool us down.
"I'm sorry."
"Are you okay?" Cash screamed as loudly as he could to the unknown hiker. "Of course they're not gorilla. You hit them with the biggest rock you could find," I answered him instead. "Hey, I said I'm sorry." Cash victimized himself. "Yes, we heard you," Max responded as to ignore him. "Do you need help?" Miguel yelled on his knees at the top of his lungs to the mountain bottom. "Why do you never listen to me?" I argued. "Can you fucking stop already?" I said I'm sorry. Cash protested. "I'm sorry, Mateo said in a mutter. "Shut up, Mateo," his brother demanded. "Do you need help?" Miguel tried again. "You're the biggest, most annoying idiot I have." I rambled. "Ami, stop." Ramiro interrupted me. "Me? He's the one who hit someone with a fucking rock." "Calm down, guys, this is not the time for this." Lucas once again tried to stop the argument. "No, I think it's..." Cash started. "Guys, they're not answering." Miguel stopped him preoccupied. "Fuck. I'm sorry, we should go check," Cash apologized. "Right, sorry. But how?" I asked. "What do you mean, how?" Mateo asked back, looking as confused as Daniel. They seemed to be the only ones who didn't immediately notice. He threw the rock west. There's no path down west, Max explained. Oh, well, we're not just leaving them, right? Right. To give you some perspective, usually the way down can take up to an hour, but if you go down from Los Arenales, the sand takes you down like a slide, saving up to 30 minutes. Took us more than 2 hours to get to the bottom. To be fair, we spent a lot of time searching for what was probably a recent corpse. But the bushes didn't make us any favors. I ended up with cuts all around my legs and arms, and I was still looking better than most of the boys. Cash kept trying to push the bushes out of the way. Miguel fell face first into the ground after attempting a very stupid jump, and Lucas stepped on a rock that slipped, taking him down a few meters on his butt. As we got closer to the bottom, we decided to spread to cover more ground, and eventually it worked out. I saw Mateo waving to me from the distance. I called for Miguel, making a similar gesture, and started running towards Mateo. I was getting ready for so much possibilities. I did not expect it a cave. Once I got close enough, I asked Mateo where was the guy, and he just pointed at the blood trail that went inside the cave and into the darkness. Took me a little bit to start talking. How can a clay mountain have a cave? Well, it's not all just clay. We are almost at the base. There has to be more rock here, I guess. Mateo answered me. What the fuck? Miguel's confusion made itself visible on his face as he arrived. Yep, was all I could add. Maybe it's man-made, he considered. Why? Mateo asked. I don't know. If it's natural, it should have collapsed with the rain, right? Maybe, Mateo said, yet he didn't seem satisfied with that argument. Cash didn't say a word once he arrived. He just walked right into the cave so fast that we didn't react in time to stop him. A few seconds later, he came out. There's rock inside, he told us as he came out. That's claystone. It's still not safe to go in, I refuted. Nope, it's actual rock, the floor, the walls, everything. Looks like a different mountain.
Weird, Mateo muttered.
Just give me a flashlight. I'll go find them myself, Cash demanded. What the fuck? No, you're not going, that's clay, Lucas told him as he joined us. He says there's rock inside, I explained. Well, I have to see it, Miguel decided. No, it's dangerous. Just let me. Cash attempted to stop him. Shut up, Cash. He interrupted him, annoyed. Miguel turned on the flashlight on his phone as he walked in. It was true. Just at the point where the darkness cut our vision off, the floor started to reveal a gray and white rocky floor, rocky walls, and a rocky roof. Yet the roof didn't go all the way out, so the mystery of how did the clay surface of the mountain didn't fall covering the entrance still remained. But the boys didn't seem to care much. Daniel didn't hesitate once he arrived and saw Cash, Miguel, and Lucas inside. Mateo, you stay outside, he ordered. But go with her. Find a place with phone signal and call an ambulance, okay? He added. Okay. Come on, Mateo, he's right, I replied. We surrounded the mountain to get to the canyon faster. No signal. We tried the Sombrero Hill. No signal. We tried the parking lot. We even tried just walking around holding our phones up like imbeciles. We got nothing. Once we gave up, we decided to check up with the boys. Maybe they found the person and needed some help to carry them back into the cars. Maybe they had already given up too. We reached the cave surprisingly fast this time. Ramiro was there waiting for us, which meant Max was also inside. So the weaklings wait outside, I guess, I joked. It's been more than an hour, Ami, Ramiro answered, worried. Did you get the ambulance? He continued. No, we couldn't find any signal, Mateo explained. Okay, I'll go in, Ramiro decided. No, wait, we should get some help, I opposed. And how long until that? 2 more hours? I don't care if a random stupid hiker dies, but my man's in their army, and your friends too. I'm going too, Mateo agreed. Fuck, okay, but we move slow. If they're stuck, we don't want to end up the same, I said, still not fully convinced of this idea. The inside was, as Cash said, solid rock, no clay, no sand, just rock all around us, forming an almost perfect semi-cylindrical straight hull angled down. We had our phones as flashlights, but the light didn't reach the end of the tunnel. For a while, the path was just that, rock after rock. There were some sidetracks, but we knew what direction they went. We just had to follow the blood path right on the middle. Then the blood stopped, and just a few meters after, laying on the floor, there was a rosary. I knelt down to inspect it. "What?" I whispered. "Who brought that?" Mateo asked. "Just leave it," Ramiro demanded. "It's probably from the hiker, or maybe it was here before," I hypothesized. "If it was here before they came in, why did they kept going?" Mateo inquired. "Because there's a bleeding person who's probably hallucinating from the blood loss and might have lost that while wandering. Neither Cash nor Max would get scared from something like that," Ramiro pointed out. "And Miguel wouldn't turn back before them," I added. "Just forget about it. It's nothing," Ramiro told him as to calm him down. I chose not to tell them about the sticky liquid on the crucifix. Without the blood trail, I began to leave some cookie scrums to guide us up. Yet the path didn't bifurcate, at least not before a new obstacle made my simple plan useless. We reached water. The path stopped going down at the point where the water reached just a few centimeters above our ankles. It was cold, but we kept going. Then we finally reached a fork in the path, 3 tunnels. "I'll take the right one," Ramiro decided. "What? No, we're not dividing," I complained. "You think they didn't?" He refuted. I know they probably did. "Keep your right hand on the wall," Mateo proposed. "What?" Ramiro asked. "That way you won't get lost. You're right on the way in, you're left on the way out." "I'll take the center one." Fine, but we meet up here in 10 minutes, okay?" I demanded. They both agreed. I went left. I don't know for how long I walked. I set an alarm on my phone to ring after 5 minutes, but it never did, and it really felt like I had walked for more than 5 minutes, more than 20 even. Eventually, I realized the water level was getting higher. I figured the path was still going slightly down, just at such a slow phase I didn't notice. I decided to check my phone to make sure I had actually set the alarm. The second I turned on the screen, I got a low battery sign and the flashlight went off. At that point, in complete darkness, all I could see was the shining screen with those big numbers on the center. 1:30 a.m. More than 10 hours had passed. Then the screen turned off. I was scared. I couldn't understand why I was there anymore. I love my friends, but getting under an unexplored flooded cave? Alone? I was hyperventilating. I wanted to cry. I regretted everything. I was shaking, and the cold water now above my knees felt so uncomfortable it only fed my anxiety. I tried to calm down, breathe for a while, but the humid air wouldn't let my brain be at peace. I turned on the phone screen once again. Then came the smell. It was the most disgusting smell I felt in my life, like if the water I was walking on was nothing but a mixture of burning, rotting eggs, asthma, and brownish green. Not like I could see if it was green, but the smell told me it was. At least that's what my paranoid brain figured. I wanted to puke blood, but I needed to get out of there as fast as I could, so I quickly searched for the flashlight option on my phone and I turned it back on, ignoring the low battery alert. Then, while still looking down, I stretched my arm to find the wall. It was not there. I moved the flashlight to my left, but the clouds of dust or steam or whatever it was blocked the light before I could find any walls at all. I was lost. I figured all I had to do was to turn back and run as fast as I could, so I did. But as I turned around, I almost died when I saw people right in front of me. Then I almost smiled when I realized who they were. Miguel was unconscious, bleeding from the head, while Cash was holding him by the shoulder. I cried at that point, but the tears were of happiness. Not because I thought they could save me, but rather because I wasn't alone anymore. "Guys, we told you to stay out," Cash said.
I am sorry.
"Doesn't matter. Help me, there's no time," he interrupted. I quickly grabbed Miguel from the other side and we started walking. "Why did you walk this deep?" I questioned. "It looked safe," Cash answered. "What? The water's on our hips, Cash. It wasn't before. It's raising on me, you've noticed that by this point." "Where's Miguel's flashlight?" I continued. "Lost it." "What's that smell?" "Keep walking," he ordered. "What happened to him?" "Just keep fucking walking on me." As he said that, he let go of Miguel and turned back. I stopped for a second to ask him what was he doing. Before I could speak, I saw the source of the smell. It was a goat, or rather it resembled one, but sadder. Its head was bigger than my torso, and it had 4 twisted horns, each one looping on different dimensions, but all of them pointing forward. The neck was connected to a big rug of white wool filled with what seemed to be shit and blood. It had no limbs. It just floated with most of its body out of the water, but the thin hairs that were underwater seemed to stretch forever into the depths. Following it, there was an army of red, green, and yellow flies, each the size of a thumb. I didn't hesitate. I left Cash behind. Felt bad for that, but he told me to keep walking, and so I did. I heard him struggle against the thing behind me. Now and then there would be a big crash that would make me think Cash had finally lost, but then I would hear him scream and curse once again. As I kept on moving, the sound decreased, and so did the smell. But eventually the sound stopped, cutting one of Cash's screams mid-sentence with a last bang of rock hitting rock. No more screams, no more crashes. Cash was dead. I looked at Miguel. He wasn't breathing. I envied him for not being part of this anymore. I felt sorry for his mother and for what I was about to do. I needed to get out, so I left his body behind. I ran for what felt like minutes, but I was sure were hours. The smell was once again catching up with me, and the water was now on my chest. Desperate to move any faster, I tried swimming, but I've never learned how, so that only slowed me down and broke my phone. Running in the darkness under the cold water wasn't taking me anywhere. When I reached a dead end for the 3rd time, the smell was so strong I could tell that thing would catch me at any second. So I looked down at the water, and I knew in my soul there was something in the water looking right back at me. I took a moment to breathe, to relax. I didn't want it a stressful death. Then, once the first flies hit my back, I released all the air from my lungs and submerged. As I breathed in, I felt the cold water go inside my lungs, yet I was still breathing. At first I was afraid to open my eyes, but when I did, I was no longer on the cave, or maybe I was just looking from a different angle. All around me were an infinite amount of stars, and right in front of me was a woman. She was wearing a dark green cloak. Her skin was pale as the snow, her lips dark as the night, and her gold eyes shined under the shadow of her hood. She was carrying Miguel's body. Looking at him, she seemed angry? No, not angry, more like annoyed, confused. Curious choice, isn't it? We might partially comprehend it, but we will never truly do. Maybe I could if it was the other way around. Couldn't I? Maybe my wording might be wrong then. Maybe we are never to understand what we are not. So maybe there never was a decision to be taken, correct? Her expression softened as she looked at me, expecting me to answer. I didn't. Curious response that was. If anything, sorry for your loss, but he was never meant to be here. But you might. Will those legs decide to walk this path again if you ever are curious? I can't promise it will be easier, but if you are curious enough, nothing will stop you. And I might know thy answer. As she finished her sentence, a big childish smile appeared on her face, as if she had just accomplished something, as if she was proud of herself. Then I heard a different voice behind me, an older woman. I know what she told me, but I still can't put it into words. I woke up in my bed. The smell was still present. I was covered on that water up to the nose, which made its odor so much stronger than before that I could feel it as it traveled in and out of my lungs as solid bricks. I cleaned my face with my blanket, which didn't fully got rid of it, but it was enough. I searched for my phone. Of course it wasn't there, so I turned on my computer and opened the group chat on a navigator. There were some new messages already. Hello, it was Lucas. Guys, I know it's late, but I think I had a dream. But I'm not even sure if it was a dream, and I think I'm sweating. But there was water and Ramiro isn't answering my messages. Then a third message just a few minutes after. Fuck, I sound so stupid. I'm sorry. I don't think it was a dream. Cash replied a little later and continued with, everyone, tell me you're fine. Please. Ramiro, please answer my messages. Lucas sent in a hurry. Max, Miguel, Ami, Daniel, Mateo, someone please. Cash was panicking. Cash, I think Max is dead. Lucas said right after I connected. Miguel is dead. I added, what? I couldn't see Cash's expression through the screen, but I could tell how devastated he was. There was this thing like a serpent, and it was choking him, and I don't know, I think he's dead. Ramiro explained. I dropped Miguel, he wasn't breathing anymore. I justified myself. Ramiro was hurt, and I was trying to help him, but I felt and I lost him. Lucas added. I felt too. Maybe Ramiro is also on his bed. I suggested. Okay, I'll go to his house, he said before disconnecting. This is my fucking fault, I'm so fucking sorry. Cash sent that message a few hours later. I cried for a while after that, then I took a bath. I passed the following hours holding on to the hope that Miguel was still alive, hoping that he will answer our messages, or at the very least that if he really was dead, that he wasn't on his bed waiting for his mother to find him covered on blood and that horrible putrid smell. I think, or at least back then I thought, it would be easier for her if she believed that he had ran away or that he had a more peaceful death. But then Mateo answered. Daniel's dead. Found him on his room, tried CPR, and called an ambulance. He didn't make it. The next few days were hard. Cash and I went back to the mountain to check. But there was no cave. The police started an investigation on Max, Ramiro, and Miguel's cases since those didn't seem as natural as Daniel's heart attack. Miguel's body was found bleeding on his bed. Maria declared that she last saw him with me as I expected, but she also said that it couldn't have been me. When asked, I said we went to the mountain, then stayed on the beach and took him home around 3 in the morning. Cash backed up my story, and the police never found any more evidence against us. Now the official story says it was an elaborated suicide. A few years later, Maria told me she was awake at 3 waiting for us to come back, so she knew I had lied. She asked me for the truth, and back then I didn't answer. Maria, if you read this, then now you know all I do. I sadly don't know how he ended up the way he did, but I'll do my best to find that out. Ramiro survived. Wouldn't be for Lucas, he'd probably be dead too. When he found him, his face was purple with red markings all around his neck and torso. His parents awoke when Lucas got into the house screaming his name. They called an ambulance while Lucas performed CPR. When asked about it, Ramiro just said, I did this to myself. I don't think the officers believed him, but they didn't question him either. He's permanently on a wheelchair now. Finally, Max was never found. He didn't appear on his bed like the rest of us. But both Ramiro and Lucas were sure he didn't make it. It's been some years since then. I never asked any of the others for more details on their experiences. Never spoken about this with my therapist either. I kept it all to myself, and as far as I know, so did everyone else. We still have our group chat, but haven't talked much since then. I'm just writing this because yesterday I visited Miguel's grave and it broke me. I miss him. I miss Max and I miss Daniel too. They deserve their stories to be told. They deserve the truth. Maria, if you ever read this, I'm sorry for leaving him behind. I keep telling myself he wasn't breathing, but that doesn't make me feel less guilty. I'm sorry for letting them inside that cave. I'm sorry for taking so long to go in too. But above it all, I'm sorry for lying. Daniel didn't have a natural death. Max didn't run away. Ramiro didn't choke himself, and Miguel didn't kill himself. I'm sorry for lying. Here is the truth. We were all taken by the horrors buried on a cave, hidden at the west bottom side of the Salamanca mountain. I work on cargo ships, long hauls across the empty stretches of ocean. It's usually monotonous, the endless blue, the thrum of the engines, the routine. But this last trip was different. It started about 10 days out from port, somewhere in the Pacific. I was on a late watch, just me and the stars and the hiss of the bow cutting through the water. That's when I first saw it. A disturbance in the dark water off the port side, too large to be dolphins, too deliberate for a random wave. Then, a plume of mist shot up, illuminated briefly by the deck lights. A whale, not unheard of, but this one was big, really big, and it was close. The next morning, it was still there, keeping pace with us. A few of the other guys spotted it. Our bosun, a weathered old hand on the sea, squinted at it through his binoculars. Humpback, by the looks of it, he grunted. Big fella, lost his pod, maybe. But there was something off about it. It wasn't just its size, though it was easily one of the largest I'd ever seen, rivaling the length of some of our smaller tenders. It was its back. It was a roadmap of scars, not just the usual nicks and scrapes you see from barnacles or minor tussles. These were huge, gouged-out marks, some pale and old, others a more recent angry pink. Long, tearing slashes and circular, crater-like depressions. It looked like it had been through a war, and it was alone. Whales, especially humpbacks, are often social. This one was a solitary giant, a scarred sentinel in the vast, empty ocean, and it was following us, not just swimming in the same general direction, but actively shadowing our ship. If we adjusted course, it adjusted too, maintaining its position a few hundred yards off our port side. This went on for the rest of the day. Some of the crew found it a novelty, a bit of wildlife to break the tedium. I just found it unsettling. There was an intelligence in the way it moved, in the occasional roll that brought a massive, dark eye to the surface, seemingly looking right at us. The second day was the same. The whale was our constant companion. The novelty had worn off for most. Now it was just there, a silent, scarred presence. I spent a lot of my off hours watching it. There was a weird sort of gravity to it. I couldn't shake the feeling that its presence meant something, though I couldn't imagine what. The scars on its back fascinated and repulsed me. What could do that to something so immense? A propeller from a massive ship? An orca attack, but on a scale I'd never heard of? Then, late on the second day of its appearance, something else happened. Our ship started to lose speed. Not drastically at first, just a subtle change in the engine's rhythm, a slight decrease in the vibration underfoot. The chief engineer, a perpetually stressed man, was down in the engine room for hours. Word came up that there was some kind of issue with one of the propeller shafts, or maybe a fuel line clog. Nothing critical, they said, but we'd be running at reduced speed for a while, at least until they could isolate the problem. That's when the whale's behavior changed. It was dusk. The ocean was turning that deep, bruised purple it gets before full night. I was leaning on the rail, watching it. The ship was noticeably slower now, the wake less pronounced. Suddenly, the whale surged forward, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. It dove, then resurfaced right beside the hull, maybe 20 yards out. And then it hit us. The sound was like a muffled explosion, a deep, resonant thump that vibrated through the entire vessel. Metal groaned. I stumbled, grabbing the rail. On the bridge, I heard someone shout. The whale surfaced again, its scarred back glistening, and then, with a deliberate, powerful thrust of its tail, it slammed its massive body into our hull again. Thump! This time, alarms started blaring. "What in the hell?" someone yelled from the deck below. The captain was on the wing of the bridge, her voice cutting through the sudden chaos. "All hands report." What was that? The whale hit us a third time. This wasn't a curious nudge. This was an attack. It was ramming us. The impacts were heavy enough to make you think it could actually breach the hull if it hit a weak spot. Panic started to set in. A creature that size, actively hostile. We were a steel ship, sure, but the ocean is a big place, and out here you're very much on your own. A few of the guys, deckhands mostly, grabbed gaff hooks and whatever heavy tools they could find, rushing to the side, yelling, trying to scare it off. The bosun appeared with a flare gun, firing a bright red star over its head. The whale just ignored it, preparing for another run. "Get the rifles!" someone shouted. I think it was the second mate. "We need to drive it off." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. Shooting it? A whale? It felt monstrously wrong, but it was also ramming a multi-ton steel vessel, and that was just insane. Could cripple us, or worse, damage itself fatally on our hull. Before anyone could get a clear shot, as a group of crew members gathered with rifles on the deck, the whale suddenly dove. Deep, it vanished into the darkening water as if it had never been there. The immediate assumption was that the show of force, the men lining the rail, had scared it off. We waited, tense, for a long 5 minutes. Nothing. The ship continued its slow, laborious crawl through the water. The captain ordered damage assessments. Miraculously, apart from some scraped paint and a few dented plates above the waterline, our ship seemed okay. But the mood was grim. What if it came back? Why would a whale do that? Rabies? Some weird sickness? It's the slowdown, the veteran sailor said, his voice low, as he stood beside me later, staring out at the black water. Animals can sense weakness. Ships wounded, moving slow. Maybe it thinks we're easy prey or dying. Prey? I asked. It's a baleen whale, isn't it? It eats krill. The veteran sailor just shrugged, his weathered face unreadable in the dim deck lights. Nature's a strange thing, kid. Out here, anything's possible. The engine problems persisted. We were making maybe half our usual speed. Every creak of the ship, every unusual slap of a wave against the hull, had us jumping. The whale didn't reappear for the rest of the night, or so we thought. My watch came around again in the dead of night, the hours between 2 and 4 a.m. The deck was mostly deserted. The sea was calm, black glass under a star-dusted sky. I was trying to stay alert, scanning the water, my nerves still frayed. And then I saw it, a faint ripple, then the gleam of a wet back, much closer this time. It was the whale. It had returned, but only when the deck was quiet, when I was, for all intents and purposes, alone. My heart hammered. I reached for my radio, ready to call it in. But then it did something that made me pause. It didn't charge. It just swam parallel to us, very close, its massive body a dark shadow in the water. It let out a long, low moan, a sound that seemed to vibrate in my bones more than I heard it with my ears. It was an incredibly mournful, almost pained sound. Then it slowly, deliberately bumped against the hull. Not a slam, not an attack. A bump, like a colossal cat rubbing against your leg. Thump, then another. Thump. It was the strangest thing. It was looking right at me. I swear it. One huge, dark eye visible as it rolled slightly. It seemed, I don't know, desperate? It kept bumping the ship, always on the port side where I stood. Always these strange, almost gentle impacts. I didn't call it in. I just watched. This wasn't the aggressive creature from before. This was something else. It continued this for nearly an hour. The moment I saw another crew member, a sleepy-looking engineer on his way to the galley, emerge onto the deck further aft, the whale sank silently beneath the waves and was gone. It was as if it only wanted me to see it, to witness this bizarre, pleading behavior. The next day, the engineers were still wrestling with the engines. We were still slow, and the whale kept up its strange pattern. During the day, if a crowd was on deck, it stayed away, or if it did approach and men rushed to the rails with shouts or weapons, it would dive and disappear. But if I was alone on deck, or if it was just me and maybe one other person who wasn't paying attention to the water, it would come close. It would start the bumping. Not hard, not damaging, but persistent. Thump, thump, thump. It was eerie. It felt like it was trying to communicate something. The other crew were mostly convinced it was mad, or that the ship's vibrations, altered by the engine trouble, were agitating it. The talk of shooting it became more serious. The captain was hesitant, thankfully. International maritime laws about protected species, but also, I think, a sailor's reluctance to harm such a creature unless absolutely necessary. Still, rifles were kept ready. I started to feel a strange connection to it. Those scars, that mournful sound it made when it was just me, it didn't feel like aggression, felt like a warning, or a plea. But for what? I'd stare at its scarred back and wonder again what could inflict such wounds. The gashes looked like they were made by something with immense claws, or teeth that weren't like a shark's. The circular marks were even weirder, almost like suction cups, but grotesquely large, and with torn edges. The morning it all ended, I was on the dawn watch. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east, a pale gray smear. The sea was flat, oily. We were still crawling. The whale was there, off the port side as usual. It had been quiet for the last few hours, just keeping pace. I felt a profound weariness. 3 days of this. 3 days of the ship being crippled. 3 days of this scarred giant shadowing us. Its intentions a terrifying enigma. I remember sipping lukewarm coffee, staring out at the horizon, when I saw the whale react. It suddenly arched its back, its massive tail lifting high out of the water before it brought it down with a tremendous slap. The sound cracked across the quiet morning like a gunshot. Then it dove, a panicked, desperate dive. Not the slow, deliberate submergence I was used to. It went straight down, leaving a swirling vortex on the surface. "What the hell now?" I muttered, gripping the rail. My eyes scanned the water where it had disappeared. And then I saw it. Further back, maybe half a mile behind us, something else was on the surface. At first, it was just a disturbance, a dark shape in the gray water. But it was moving fast, incredibly fast, closing the distance to where the whale had been. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't any whale I'd ever seen. As it got closer, still mostly submerged, I could see its back. It was long, dark, and glistening, but it wasn't smooth like a whale's. It had ridges and things sticking out of it. 2 of them on either side of its spine, arcing up and then back. They weren't fins, not like a shark's dorsal fin or a whale's flippers. They looked like wings, leathery, membranous wings, like a bat's, but colossal, and with no feathers, just bare, dark flesh stretched over a bony framework. They weren't flapping. They were held semi-furled against its back, cutting through the water like grotesque sails. The thing was slicing through the ocean at a speed that made our struggling cargo ship look stationary. A cold dread, so absolute it was almost paralyzing, seized me. This was what the whale was running from. This was the source of its scars. The winged thing reached the spot where our whale had dived. It didn't slow. It just tilted and slipped beneath the surface without a splash, as if the ocean were a veil it simply passed through. For a minute, nothing. The sea was calm again, deceptively so. I was shaking, my coffee cup clattering against the saucer I'd left on the railing. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Flesh wings? In the ocean. Then the water began to change color. Slowly at first, then with horrifying speed. A bloom of red spread outwards from the spot where they'd both gone down. A slick, dark, crimson stain on the gray morning sea. It grew wider and wider. The whale, our whale. I felt sick. A profound sense of horror and, strangely, loss. That scarred giant, with its mournful cries and strange, bumping pleas. It hadn't been trying to hurt us. It had been terrified. It had been trying to get our attention, trying to warn us, maybe even seeking refuge with the only other large thing in that empty stretch of ocean, our ship. And when we slowed down, when we became vulnerable, it must have known we were drawing its hunter closer. Or maybe it was trying to get us to move faster, to escape. The slamming, it was desperate. The blood slick was vast now, a hideous smear on the calm water. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. My crewmates were starting to stir, a few coming out on deck, drawn by the dawn. I heard someone ask, "What's that?" "Oil spill." I didn't answer, couldn't. I was still staring at the bloody water, a good quarter-mile astern now as we slowly pulled away. And then, something broke the surface in the middle of it. It rose slowly, terribly. It wasn't the whale. First, a section of that ridged, dark back, then those hideous, furled wings of flesh, and then its head, or what passed for a head. There were no eyes that I could see, no discernible features, really, except for what was clearly its mouth. It was a hole, a vast, circular maw, big enough to swallow a small car, and it was lined, packed, with rows upon rows of needle-sharp, glistening teeth, some as long as my arm. They weren't arranged like a shark's, in neat rows. They were a chaotic forest of ivory daggers, pointing inwards. The flesh around this nightmare orifice was pale and rubbery, like something that had never seen the sun. It just was a vertical abyss of teeth, hovering above the blood-stained water. It wasn't looking at the ship, not in a general sense. It was higher out of the water than I would have thought possible for something of that bulk without any visible means of buoyancy beyond the slight unfurling of those terrible wings, which seemed to tread water with a slow, obscene power. It rotated slowly, and then it stopped, and I knew, with a certainty that froze the marrow in my bones, that it was looking at me. There were no eyes. I will swear to that until the day I die. There was nothing on that featureless, toothed head that could be called an eye, but I felt its gaze, a cold, ancient, utterly alien regard. It wasn't curious. It wasn't even malevolent, not in a way I could understand. It was like being assessed by a butcher, a focused, chilling attention, right on me, standing there on the deck of our vessel. Time seemed to stop. The sounds of the ship, the distant chatter of the waking crew, faded away. It was just me and that thing staring at each other across a widening expanse of bloody water. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Couldn't breathe. Then the chief engineer came up beside me, the same one who'd been battling our engine troubles. "God Almighty," he whispered, his face pale. "What in the name of all that's holy is that?" The spell broke. The thing didn't react to the chief. His focus, if that's what it was, remained on me for another second or two. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, it began to sink back beneath the waves, its toothed maw the last thing to disappear into the red. The captain was on the bridge wing, binoculars pressed to her eyes, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Orders were shouted. "Full power. Get us out of here. Whatever you have to do. Chief, give me everything you've got." Suddenly, the engine problem that had plagued us for days seemed less important. Miraculously, or perhaps spurred by the sheer terror of what we'd just witnessed, the engines roared to life, the ship shuddering as it picked up speed, faster than it had moved in days. No one spoke for a long time. We just stared back at the bloody patch of water, shrinking in our wake. The silence was heavier than any storm. The realization hit me fully then, like a physical blow. The whale, the scars, the way it only approached when I was alone, bumping the hull, moaning. It wasn't trying to hurt us. It was running. It was terrified. It was trying to tell us, trying to warn us. Maybe it even thought our large metal ship could offer some protection, or that we could help it. When we slowed down, we became a liability, a slow-moving target that might attract its pursuer. Its frantic slamming against the hull when the ship first slowed. It was trying to get us to move, to escape the fate it knew was coming for it. And it had singled me out for some reason. Maybe I was just the one on watch most often when it was desperate. Maybe it sensed. I don't know. I don't want to know. The rest of the voyage was a blur of hushed conversations, wide eyes, and constant, fearful glances at the ocean. We reported an unidentified aggressive marine phenomenon and the loss of a whale, but how do you even begin to describe what we saw? Who would believe it? The official log was sanitized. We made it to port. I signed off the ship as soon as we docked. I haven't been back to sea since. I don't think I ever can. It's not a job most people dream of, I guess. Mortician. I prepare the dead for their final goodbyes. It's quiet work, mostly. Precise. I've seen a lot in my time here, but nothing prepares you for some things. And nothing prepared me for him. This started about a month ago, maybe a little more. It's all a bit fuzzy now, for reasons that will become clear. I remember the day it shifted, though. I'd just finished with a young woman. A girl, really. Late teens, maybe early 20s. The report said suicide. Gunshot to the face. A messy, tragic end. Her body was odd. Not in a gruesome way, not more than usual for that kind of trauma. But her shoulders. They seemed to sag just a little too much, even in death, even with me working to make her presentable. As if she'd been carrying something immense for a very long time. Her parents, when they came to make arrangements, were devastated, of course. They kept saying she'd been struggling with anxiety, kept talking about a weight, said she always complained about a terrible weight on her shoulders, a physical burden nobody else could see or understand. They said she insisted it wasn't just a feeling, it was real. I nodded, listened. Grief does strange things to people, makes them fixate on details. I did my work, tried to offer what little comfort I could. She was buried a few days later, and then he started appearing. The old man. Every morning, without fail, when I arrived at the mortuary building, he'd be there, waiting, leaning against the cold brick wall by the entrance, or sometimes just standing, swaying slightly, like a dried-up reed in a non-existent wind. He was old, impossibly old, it felt like. Not just wrinkled and gray, but ancient. Skeletal is the only word that comes close. His skin was like old parchment, stretched so tight over his bones you could see their outline, his cheekbones, his jaw, the knobby joints of his fingers. He was abnormally thin, as if he hadn't eaten a proper meal in a century. His clothes were rags, thin and dirty, offering no protection against the morning chill. And every single day, the same routine. I'd see him from down the block, a knot tightening in my stomach. I'd try to walk a little faster, maybe look at my phone, pretend I didn't see him. It never worked. As I'd approach the door, he'd shuffle forward, his movements slow, agonizing. One hand, gnarled and trembling, would extend towards me. His eyes, sunk deep in their sockets, were like old, clouded marbles, but they'd fix on me with an unnerving intensity. "Spare change, son?" His voice was a dry rasp, like sandpaper on wood. Just a little something. For an old man, always the same words, always that same pleading yet somehow demanding tone. He never got aggressive, never raised his voice. Just that persistent, quiet begging. The first few times, I felt a pang of pity. He looked so wretched. I gave him $1, maybe $2. He'd snatch it with surprising speed, his thin lips pulling back in what might have been a smile, or maybe just a grimace. Then he'd shuffle away, disappearing around the corner. But he was back the next day, and the next, and the next. My pity started to wear thin. It became an annoyance, a daily irritation I had to navigate just to get to work. Why me? There were other people going into the building, other businesses on the same block. But he only ever approached me. He'd be there when I arrived, and gone by the time anyone else showed up. It was like he knew my schedule. I started to ignore him. I'd walk past, eyes straight ahead, headphones in even if I wasn't listening to anything. He'd still try. That raspy voice would follow me. "Son?" Just a little something. I'd feel his gaze on my back until I was through the door. It made my skin crawl. The building manager saw him a couple of times, shooed him away. He'd go docile as a lamb. But the next morning, he'd be back, waiting for me. I began to dread going to work, not because of the deceased I had to care for, but because of the living ghost at the door. He never touched me, never got too close, but his presence was a constant, gnawing pressure. Felt targeted. I wondered briefly if he was some distant, destitute relative of one of the families I'd served. But that didn't make sense. His appearance was too extreme, too unsettling. And this all started, I was sure of it, right after the young woman, the one with the weight, was laid to rest. The thought flickered, then I dismissed it. Coincidence. This city has plenty of desperate people. But the daily ritual continued. The skeletal figure, the outstretched hand, the raspy plea. Some days I'd give in, shove a bill into his hand just to make him go away, to stop that awful, expectant stare. He never said thank you, just took the money and vanished. Other days, I'd steel myself and walk past, the guilt and annoyance warring within me. This went on for weeks. felt like months. My sleep started to suffer. I'd see his face in my dreams, that skeletal, waiting figure. I was jumpy, irritable. My colleagues at the mortuary noticed I was on edge. I just shrugged it off, said I wasn't sleeping well. How could I explain this? That an ancient-looking beggar was singling me out every morning? They'd think I was losing it. Finally, one morning, I snapped. I'd had a particularly bad night, filled with those hollow, staring eyes. As I approached the building, there he was, same spot, same pose. So, a little help for an old man. Look, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I can't keep doing this. You need to find somewhere else to be. He just blinked, slowly. That hand remained outstretched. Just a little something, son. Frustration boiled over.
No.
Not today. Not anymore. You need to leave me alone. He didn't react, didn't flinch. Just kept that hand out, his gaze unwavering. It was like talking to a wall, a particularly creepy, emaciated wall. That was it. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police, I told him, my hand shaking slightly as I dialed. This is harassment. He watched me dial, his expression unchanging. It was unnerving. He showed no fear, no concern, just patience. The dispatcher took my report. Loitering, persistent begging, causing distress. They said they'd send a car when one was available. I stood there, a few feet from the old man, waiting. He waited too, perfectly still. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant city sounds. It felt like a showdown, a ridiculous, pathetic showdown. A patrol car pulled up about 20 minutes later. 2 officers got out, young, looking bored. I explained the situation, how this man was here every day, how he only approached me, how it was becoming a serious issue. They looked at the old man. He just stood there, looking frail and harmless, a picture of pitiable old age. One of the officers, a woman, sighed. "Sir," she said to me, "he looks pretty harmless, and, well, he's on a public sidewalk. Technically, he's not doing anything illegal by asking for money. But it's every day," I insisted, "and he only targets me. It's unsettling." The other officer, a burly guy, chimed in. "Look, we can ask him to move along, but he'll probably just be back tomorrow. These guys, they find a spot." He shrugged. "Maybe," the woman officer suggested, her tone now slightly patronizing, "you could just give him a few dollars? Might be easier than calling us every day. He looks like he could really use it." I stared at them, incredulous. That was their solution? Give him money? I felt a surge of helpless anger. "So you're not going to do anything?" "We'll talk to him, sir," the burly one said, already walking towards the old man. "Tell him not to bother you. But honestly, there's not much more we can do." They had a quiet word with him. I couldn't hear what was said. The old man nodded a few times. Then the officers came back to me. "He says he won't bother you again, sir," the woman said. "Hopefully that's the end of it." They got back in their car and drove off. I looked at the old man. He was looking at me, that same empty, expectant gaze. He hadn't moved. The officer's intervention had done nothing. He was still here, waiting. A wave of defeat washed over me. They were right. What else could be done? I was stuck with him, defeated, frustrated, and just wanting it to be over. I reached into my wallet. I didn't have much cash, but I pulled out a 20. Not a lot, but not a little either. Enough, I hoped, to make him leave for good this time. Maybe enough for a decent meal, a warm place for a night. I walked over to him, held out the bill. "Here," I said, my voice flat. "Take it, and please just go." His skeletal fingers, surprisingly nimble, plucked the 20 from my hand. For the first time, I saw something flicker in those clouded eyes. A glint, and his lips pulled back into that smile grimace, wider this time. It sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't say a word. He just turned, with that same slow, shuffling gait, and walked away. He didn't look back. He rounded the corner and was gone. I stood there for a long moment, the spot where he'd stood feeling suddenly strangely empty. A profound sense of relief washed through me. Finally, it was over. He was gone. Maybe the 20 was all it took. Maybe he'd finally gotten what he wanted from me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of normalcy. I went to work, focused on my tasks. The constant background hum of anxiety I'd been living with seemed to have faded. I felt lighter. I actually ate a proper dinner that night, slept soundly for the first time in weeks. I woke up the next morning feeling heavy. Not emotionally heavy, physically heavy. My shoulders ached, a deep, burning ache, as if I'd been lifting weights all night. My neck was stiff. I groaned, rolling out of bed. Must have slept funny. I shuffled towards the bathroom, the ache in my shoulders intensifying with each step. Felt like I was carrying something substantial. I stretched, trying to work out the kinks, but the feeling persisted. A dull, crushing pressure centered right between my shoulder blades, radiating outwards. I reached the bathroom, flicked on the light, and looked in the mirror, and I screamed. It wasn't a loud scream, more of a choked, strangled gasp. My blood ran cold, colder than any chilled room in the mortuary. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to break free. There, in the mirror, perched on my shoulders, was the old man. He was sitting there, cross-legged, as if my shoulders were the most natural throne in the world. His skeletal legs were hooked around my neck, his hideously thin arms wrapped around my head, his gnarled fingers resting lightly on my temples. He was a dead weight, a grotesque, leering gargoyle, and he was smiling, that same wide, lipless grimace, but this time it was triumphant, knowing. His clouded eyes, reflected in the mirror, stared directly into mine. I whirled around, hands flying up to my shoulders, expecting to feel him, to grab him, to throw him off. Nothing. My hands met only my own skin, my own shirt. There was nothing there. I spun back to the mirror, heart pounding. He was still there, still perched on my shoulders, still smiling that awful smile. I could feel his weight. The crushing pressure was undeniable, real. My muscles were screaming under the strain. My spine felt like it was compressing. But when I touched my shoulders, there was nothing. He existed only in the reflection, and on my aching back. "Get off me!" I yelled, my voice cracking. I thrashed, trying to shake him loose, like a dog trying to rid itself of fleas. I jumped up and down.
Ispunin circles.
Nothing happened. In the mirror, he remained perfectly balanced, his smile unwavering, his eyes fixed on mine. He didn't even sway. Panic, raw and primal, clawed at my throat. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. I splashed cold water on my face. Looked again. Still there. I pinched myself hard. I was awake. This was happening. I tried talking to him, to the reflection. "What do you want? Who are you?" My voice was a desperate whisper. No response. Just that silent, knowing smile. His weight seemed to increase, pressing me down. I stumbled out of the bathroom, avoiding mirrors. But I could still feel him. That terrible, crushing burden. The girl. The young woman who'd carried a weight. Her slumped shoulders. The way her parents described her suffering. It hit me then with the force of a physical blow. This was her weight. This was what she'd been carrying. And somehow that old man, he was it, or he was its conduit. And by giving him money, by engaging with him in that final transaction, I had taken it from him, or he had passed it to me. The relief I'd felt yesterday was a cruel joke. He hadn't just left, he'd transferred. I spent the rest of the day in a daze of terror and disbelief. Every reflective surface became a source of horror. A shop window, a car's side mirror, even the dark screen of my phone. Each time, he was there, perched on my shoulders, that terrible smile fixed on his face. And the weight, God, the weight was unbearable. Who could I tell? The police? They'd thought I was overreacting to a beggar. What would they say to this? They'd lock me up. My colleagues? My friends? They'd think I'd finally cracked under the strain of my job. I remembered the young woman's parents. No one believed her, they'd said. They said it was just a feeling. Now I understood. It wasn't just a feeling. It was real. And now it was mine. I don't know what to do. The weight is always there. And every time I catch my reflection, he's there too, smiling. Waiting. I think he's waiting for me to find someone else to pass this on to. But how? And who would deserve such a fate? I think this is a curse. A curse from that poor girl or something that clung to her, and now it clings to me. The old man was just the ferryman, and there's no one in the world who will believe me. I'm carrying this alone, just like she did. It was a late shift, one of those quiet nights where the city seems to be holding its breath. The kind of night you almost welcome a call just to break the monotony. Then the radio crackled. Unit, my unit, respond to a possible 10 to 16 domestic disturbance at vague rural route descriptor. Caller is a juvenile. 10 to 16 domestic. My gut tightened. Domestics are always unpredictable, always a powder keg. Juvenile caller? Even worse. That usually means things are really bad if a kid's the one reaching out. I keyed the mic dispatch. Any further details on that 10 to 16? The dispatcher's voice came back, a little tinny. Negative. My unit. Call was very broken, heavy static. Sounded like a young male. Managed to get the address, but not much else. Sounded distressed. Mentioned something about fighting, maybe a parent.
10 à 4, en route.
My partner, let's call him Jay, grunted from the passenger seat. Kid calling on a domestic. Never a good sign. Nope, I agreed. The address was way out on the edge of our jurisdiction, bordering on county. One of those places where houses are spread thin, swallowed by trees and long driveways. Takes a while to get out there, and backup takes even longer. The drive itself felt off. The further we got from the city lights, the darker the world became. Street lights became a memory. The only illumination came from our headlights, cutting a swathe through what felt like an endless tunnel of trees. The kind of dark that presses in on you. We finally found the turnoff, a gravel road that was more potholes than path. The house itself was set way back, almost invisible from the road. A 2-story, older build, but it looked lived in. Maybe a bit unkempt, toys scattered on the porch, that kind of thing. All the windows were dark. A single car, an older sedan, was parked in the driveway. An unsettling silence hung over the place. Quiet, Jay muttered, and I couldn't disagree. Too quiet. We parked a little ways back, cut the engine. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel under our boots as we approached. I did a quick visual sweep. No obvious signs of forced entry, no sounds from within. The house just looked still, expectant. Police! Anyone home? I called out, knocking firmly on the front door. The wood felt solid. Nothing, just that heavy silence. Jay tried the doorbell. A faint, standard chime echoed from somewhere deep inside, then died. Still no response. All right, I said, keeping my voice low. I'll check windows on this side. You take the back. See if you can spot anything. Got it. Jay moved off around the side of the house. I went from window to window on the front and one side. They were all dark, curtains drawn in most. I cupped my hands around my eyes, trying to peer in through a gap in one, but it was like looking into a void. My flashlight beam just got swallowed by the blackness. A prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. This wasn't just a quiet house. It felt wrong. Then it happened. A sudden, brilliant flash from an upstairs window, almost blinding, followed instantaneously by the unmistakable booming crack of a gunshot. Muffled, but definitely a gunshot from inside. My heart hammered. Jay came running back around the corner, eyes wide. "You hear that? Gunshot! Upstairs!" I yelled, already moving towards the front door. "Dispatch! Shots fired at the vague rural route descriptor location. We're making entry. No time for pleasantries now." I kicked the door hard, right near the lock. It shuddered, then gave way with a splintering crack, flying inwards and banging against an interior wall. "Police! Show yourselves!" I shouted into the darkness, my weapon drawn, flashlight beam cutting a nervous path ahead. Jay was right beside me, doing the same. The inside of the house was pitch black, blacker than outside if that was possible. A close, stuffy smell hit us, stale air, a hint of old food, and something else, something metallic, almost like copper, faint but there. The air was heavy, cold, colder than it should have been. "Police! If you're in here, make yourself known." Jay's voice echoed unnervingly. We moved slowly, methodically. Standard room clearing, what we're trained for. Flashlights darting into corners, weapons ready. The silence was back, thick and oppressive, broken only by our own breathing and the occasional scuff of our boots on the hardwood floor. "Anyone who fired that shot, come out slowly with your hands in the air," commanded, my voice tight. Still nothing. Felt like we were shouting into a vacuum. We cleared the small entryway, moved into what looked like a living room. Furniture was ordinary, if a little cluttered. A TV, a sofa, kids' toys scattered on the floor. It looked like a family lived here, a family that had suddenly stopped. Then, a flicker of movement in the periphery of my flashlight beam, at the far end of a hallway leading deeper into the house. "Freeze! Police!" A small figure, kid, darting across the hallway, looked like a boy, maybe 10 or 12. He was running, desperation in his movements. His small face a pale blur in the split second I saw him. Before I could even process it, before I could shout another command, another figure stepped out from a doorway just beyond where the kid had run.
Taller.
Older, holding something long, a shotgun. My blood ran cold. It all happened in a split second. The older boy or teenager maybe raised the shotgun. Another blinding flash, another deafening roar that seemed to suck all the air from the hallway. The little kid crumpled, just dropped, like a puppet with its strings cut. "No!" I screamed, raw, instinctive. Jay and I both opened fire. Our service weapons barked, muzzle flashes momentarily illuminating the horrifying scene. We emptied half our magazines at the figure with the shotgun. Our bullets, they went through him. I saw them, saw the rounds pass through his form as if he were made of smoke, impacting the wall behind him with dull thuds. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, the shotgun still smoking. Then he turned his head, slowly, and looked right at us. I couldn't see his face clearly in the shifting flashlight beams, but I felt his gaze. Cold, empty. He raised the shotgun again, leveled it at us. Jay and I both braced, instinctively flinching, expecting the impact, the pain. He fired. The flash, the roar. Nothing. We were still standing, untouched. Adrenaline coursed through me, hot and sickening. My ears were ringing, and then he was gone. The older boy, the shotgun, vanished. Just not there anymore. I swung my flashlight wildly. The hallway was empty. Jay was doing the same, his breath coming in ragged gasps. What the hell was that?" he stammered. My light found the spot where the younger boy had fallen. He was gone too. No body, no blood, nothing. Just the clean floorboards and the pockmarks on the wall where our rounds had hit. My mind was reeling. Hallucination, mass hysteria, but we both saw it. We both fired our weapons. The smell of gunpowder from our guns was thick in the air, mingling with that faint, phantom scent. Did we just imagine that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No way," Jay said, his voice hoarse. "No damn way. I saw it." I shot at him. We stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in again, now laced with an icy, unnameable dread. This wasn't a domestic. This wasn't anything we'd ever trained for. "We need to clear the rest of the house," I said, trying to inject some normalcy, some procedure back into the situation. But my hands were shaking. "Check upstairs. That's where the first shot came from." Jay nodded, looking pale but resolute. "Right?" We moved towards the stairs, every creak of the old wood under our boots sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The stale air smell was stronger up here. Each step felt like we were descending further into a nightmare, not climbing. The upstairs landing was small, leading to a few closed doors. We checked the first one, a child's bedroom, clothes strewn about, posters on the wall. Empty. The second, a bathroom, towels on the floor. Equally silent. The chill in the air seemed to deepen. The last door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly with the barrel of my gun, Jay covering me. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness. A bedroom, a large bed in the center, unmade, and on the bed 2 shapes, vague outlines under a rumpled duvet. As my light hit them, the scene replayed. The older boy was there again, standing beside the bed, shotgun in hand. He looked younger. Somehow, his face contorted in something that wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite pain, more like a terrible, hollow resolve. He raised the shotgun, aimed it at the figures in the bed. "Don't!" I yelled, even though some part of me knew it was useless. He fired. Once, twice. The flashes lit up the room, the roars deafening. The figures on the bed, they didn't move. Then he turned, that same slow, deliberate turn, and he saw us, standing in the doorway. There was no surprise on his face, just that same chilling emptiness. He raised the shotgun towards us again, fired. Again the flash, the roar. Again nothing hit us. And then, just like before, he flickered and vanished. The figures on the bed gone. The room was empty.
No bodies.
No blood, no spent shells. Just the lingering smell of phantom gunpowder and the suffocating weight of what we'd just witnessed. Twice. This was madness. Sheer, unadulterated madness. "Okay," Jay said, his voice strained. "I'm officially losing my damn mind." "Me too," I managed. "Let's try dispatch again." I fumbled for my radio. "Dispatch? Unit, my unit. Can you copy?" Static. Thick, impenetrable static like the call that had brought us here. Jay tried his. Same result. Comms are out. Completely jammed. We were alone in this house. Utterly alone with whatever this was. "We searched this place top to bottom," I said, my voice harder than I felt. "Every inch. There has to be an explanation." We did. We went through every room, every closet, the small attic space, the unfinished basement. Nothing. No bodies, no fresh bloodstains, no weapons, no signs of a struggle beyond what we'd seen happen. The house was just a house. A recently lived-in house where something terrible had clearly occurred, but all physical evidence of the victims and perpetrator had vanished, leaving only these impossible echoes. It was like the house was a stage, and we'd stumbled into a performance of some horrific, never-ending play. Exhausted, frustrated, and deeply, deeply unnerved, we ended up back in that upstairs bedroom. Jay walked over to the window, the one where we'd seen the initial flash. He stared out into the moonlit backyard. The moon was high now, casting long, eerie shadows. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Hey, come look at this." I joined him. The backyard was mostly grass, a bit overgrown around the edges, a swing set standing forlornly to one side. But under the pale moonlight, you could see them. Patches, rectangular patches in the earth, slightly sunken, where the grass was disturbed, darker. They were faint, easily missed in daylight or from ground level. But from up here, with the angle of the moonlight, what are those? Jay asked, but I think we both knew. My stomach churned. He'd been in the backyard earlier. He hadn't mentioned seeing anything like this then. The angle, the light, it all mattered. Let's get outside, I said. Try comms again from there. We practically ran out of that house. The fresh night air, even though it was cold, felt like a blessing after the stale, charged atmosphere inside. My radio crackled to life the moment we cleared the porch. My unit, dispatch, what's your status? We've been trying to reach you. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Dispatch, unit, my unit. We're outside the residence. We need backup, and CSI, and maybe a priest, I don't know. What's the situation? My unit? I took a deep breath. Dispatch, we have what appear to be graves. In the backyard. Multiple. The silence on the other end was telling. Then, 10-4. My unit. Backup and relevant units are en route. ETA 20 minutes. We waited, flashlights trained on those patches in the backyard. The house looming dark and silent behind us. Felt like it was watching us. When backup finally arrived, along with the detectives and the CSI van, it was like a dam bursting. The sheer normalcy of other officers, of procedure, was a lifeline. We gave our preliminary statements, trying to make sense of what we'd seen, leaving out the impossible parts for now. No one would believe us. Not yet. The CSI team got to work on the patches. Shovels bit into the soft earth. It didn't take long. They found them. 3 bodies. 2 adults, a male and a female, in one shallow grave. Consistent with what we'd seen in the upstairs bedroom. The decomposition suggested they'd been there for a few days at most. In a separate, even shallower grave, they found the younger boy. He too looked like he'd been there for only a couple of days. The bodies were bagged and transported to the morgue. The coroner wouldn't give any on-site preliminary beyond confirming they were deceased and the state of decomposition. We'd have to wait for the official autopsy for causes of death. The house was processed. They found our spent casings, the bullet holes in the wall of the hallway. But nothing else. No other weapon, no other shells, no blood that wasn't ours. Jay had nicked his hand on the broken doorframe, and the older brother, the shooter, no trace of him. Not in the house, not in any of the graves. He was just gone, as if he'd stepped out of the scene once his part in the replay was done. Days later, the full coroner's report came in. The parents had died from shotgun wounds. Multiple. Executed. The boy was different. He had injuries. A shotgun shot injured him badly. But the official cause of death, asphyxiation due to suffocation. Dirt found deep in his lungs. He'd been buried alive, injured but still breathing. My blood turned to ice all over again, colder this time. The static-filled call. The distressed juvenile. He'd called from under the ground. He'd been calling for help as he was dying, as the earth pressed in on him. And the house had shown us. It had replayed the tragedy. His final moments, his family's murder. We never found the older brother. The case went cold. Another unsolved family annihilation, with a supernatural twist that no official report would ever contain. Jay and we talked about it just once a few weeks later. We agreed we saw what we saw. We agreed never to talk about it to anyone else on the force. They'd think we were crazy. Maybe we were. But I know that house is still out there. And sometimes late at night when the radio's quiet, I can almost hear that static. And a little boy's voice crying out from the dark. I don't sleep much anymore.